Good afternoon. The committee will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. Today, the Rules Committee is convening to consider two measures related to appropriations, H.R. 7147 and H.R. 7148. These two measures, having been negotiated on a bipartisan and bicameral basis, encompass the titles of Defense, Homeland, Labor, Health, and Human Services, Education, and Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development. With this final tranche of appropriations bills coming before the committee, the House stands on the 1 yard line. We're primed to complete consideration of full year FY26 funding across all 12 bills. As I have said previously, and as the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, this entire process has been member-driven and deliberative. The measures before us today bear the same hallmarks of the America First agenda and the priorities of not only President Trump, but also those of the American people. Both make important contributions to America's defense posture, our systems of infrastructure, research, and innovation capabilities within health and national security. I do expect that we will have some very good conversations here at the Rules Committee today, and I look forward to the testimony that our witnesses will be sharing with us. Regular order is being restored within the People's House, and it's something we should all take note of and celebrate. With that, I yield to the ranking member, Mr. McGovern, for any comments he wishes to make.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and we're back, this time considering 4 spending bills whose funding runs out at the end of the month. I want to recognize the appropriators and staff on both sides who did real work here. They put in long hours, and I know these bills are very complicated and time-consuming to put together. I wouldn't go so far as to say this represents regular order. I've been around long enough where I remember when appropriation bills would come to the Rules Committee and we would spend 2 or 3 days on the House floor debating and voting on amendments. But in any event, the 3-bill minibus, Labor, HHS, Education, Defense, Transportation, HUD, rejects President Trump's $163 billion in proposed cuts and continues to rein in the administration's lawlessness by prescribing specific funding levels and avoiding another CR. It includes increased funding for priorities like medical research, including at the NIH, opiate response, child care and Head Start, and funding to hire more than 2,500 air traffic controllers. And Democratic negotiators were able to block over 40 new poison pill Republican policy riders related to reproductive care, vaccines, sanctuary cities, and more. And I want to thank Ranking Member DeLauro in particular for her work in blocking these provisions. And I want to thank Chairman Cole. We don't always agree on everything, but I know that you try to get the best possible product. But look, there'll be plenty of time on the floor to discuss these bills, and I trust my colleagues to have a spirited discussion about the merits of moving forward on this minibus. But I just want to say, in my opinion, these appropriation bills are frankly playing by a set of rules that no longer seem to exist. The president breaks the rules all the time. He's thrown the rule book out the window. And we cannot keep pretending like everything is normal around here. In my view, I wish these bills, in particular the defense bill, had more guardrails to rein in this administration, who thinks that that they can do whatever they want and following the law is optional. Look no further than ICE. This agency is out of control. Let's be absolutely clear here. ICE must be reined in. I think ICE should actually be abolished. That's my view. We ought to start anew. It's such a tarnished agency. But at a very minimum, we should not be handing DHS a single cent more without strong, robust, foolproof guardrails and real accountability, especially when Republicans just enhanced DHS funding with $75 billion in their big ugly bill. So I will acknowledge the hard work that went into these bills. I wish to acknowledge the good provisions here. But again, we have an executive branch, an Office of Management and Budget, and a president who I do not trust to even read, let alone follow the words written on the paper that we are considering today. And so I don't think we can keep playing by the same failed rule book and pretend like everything's going to be okay. It's not going to be okay unless we enforce real accountability and demand that this president follow the law. And with that, I yield back.
Thank the ranking member. Without objection, any prepared statements that our witnesses may have will be included in the record. I now welcome our first panel, Chairman Cole and Ranking Member DeLauro from the Committee on Appropriations. As you all know, your full statement will be submitted for the record, and we ask that you summarize your statement in 5 minutes. Chairman Cole, welcome your testimony.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here. And Chairwoman Fox, who I'm sure will join us again shortly, Ranking Member McGovern, and esteemed members of the Rules Committee, I thank you for your warm welcome and your kind invitation to testify today. We've not been strangers in recent weeks, and this final stretch is the culmination of hard work and commitment. I appear before you with a package covering our last 4 appropriations measures for fiscal year 2026. These bills cover the Department of Defense, the Departments of Labor, Health and Human Services and Education, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Departments of Transportation and Housing and Urban Development. This legislation appears before you in 2 distinct bills. H.R. 7148, which covers the Defense, Labor, Health and Human Services and Education, and Transportation, Housing and Urban Development divisions, and H.R. 7147, which covers the Department of Homeland Security. As members of this committee are well aware, bipartisan bicameral negotiations are complex and take time. Nonetheless, today marks the 3rd time in as many weeks that we are appearing before you with a package representing the consensus, deliberation, and the priorities of our great nation. As with our previous packages, the outcome reflects the reality of serious governing, shared contributions, and shared compromise. I'm deeply pleased by what we were able to accomplish on behalf of the American people. The Appropriations Committee held the line on spending, putting forward 12 negotiated bills that actually reduced spending relative to what would have been in a continuing resolution. We did so while assuring full funding for countless priorities of both the Republican conference and the Trump administration. Many of these bills also deliver tangible results through member-requested community projects that address the real needs back home. At its core, this measure is about American strength and a focused future. The Defense Division, our largest measure, champions American military power, ensuring that our brave warfighters have the tools, weapon systems, and capabilities to meet any foe anywhere in the world at any time. The Labor, Health and Human Services and Education title directs investments toward high-impact priorities that save lives and expand opportunity. It supports life-saving biomedical research and resilient medical supply chains, classrooms, and training that prepare for the next generation of success, and rural hospitals and primary care to end the chronic disease epidemic. It also includes funding for programs that are near and dear to my heart, like TRIO and Gear Up, which assists first-generation and lower-income individuals preparing to attend college. The Homeland Security Bill provides for much-needed investments into enhanced border security, as well as other measures essential to protecting the American homeland from terrorists, narco-traffickers, criminals, and others who wish us harm. We are reinforcing the layered defenses that keep our country and community safe. Finally, the Transportation and Housing and Urban Development title invests in critical infrastructure across the nation, touching every district in every state. It supports the growth of America's transportation sector by enhancing FAA facilities, modernizing air traffic control, repairing and rebuilding bridges, and strengthening transit systems. It also advances key housing and economic development programs to help ensure that every American has a safe place to call home. Across these measures, we have real deliverables and real wins. So as we look forward towards finishing the job, I'm reminded of what happens when people stay at the table and see the work through. Producing a bipartisan and bicameral appropriations package is never easy, yet today we are once again moving forward with a complete set of bills. It's a testament to the hard work exhibited by this committee, including members on both sides of the aisle, and our hardworking staff who make this process work. Without them, none of this would have been possible. So I thank each of you for your time. I urge all members to support this package. Before I finish, I'd be remiss not to mention my good friend and working partner, distinguished ranking member from Connecticut. We've been at this work a long time with one another, and I always say we never start in the same place, but we quite often end in the same place because she's a good negotiator and a fair negotiating partner. And I'd be also remiss not to say it was good working with Susan Collins and Patty Murray too. They're tough-minded. We don't always agree on all the issues, but we all know it's important to get this work done and again, deliver a bicameral, bipartisan product. I think we have, and I hope people can support it. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member DeLauro.
Thank you, and good afternoon to you, to the acting chair, Mr. Roy, and the ranking member, Mr. McGovern, and Chairwoman Fox, and the other members of the committee. Again, good to be with you, and again, alongside of my dear friend, Chairman Cole. Let me begin by expressing my strong support for 3 of the 4 bills before us today. The Labor HHS Education Bill, Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development, and the Department of Defense funding bills are strong, bipartisan, bicameral agreements. And I commend ranking members McCollum and Clyburn for their great work on these measures. And again, once again, applaud the staff on both sides of the aisle, who, while we may have been fast asleep and enjoying a good night's sleep, none of them have had a good night's sleep in the last several weeks. So we're grateful for their work. Additionally, I am proud of the work we were able to do on the Labor, Health and Human Services and Education Bill, and I commend Chairman Adderholt as well. The story of these 3 bills is the same as the previous 5, a strong, bipartisan, bicameral agreement that rejects the Trump administration's efforts to eviscerate public services and reasserts Congress's power of the purse. This package rejects efforts to dismantle the Department of Education, shores up our support for European security, and increases funding for public health and medical research. It invests in affordable housing, providing relief to families feeling the squeeze from the cost of living crisis. And it supports our transportation infrastructure, making our skies safer, our streets smoother, and our passenger rail systems more efficient. Through this package, we will prevent more than 4 million American households from being evicted. We will hire 2,500 more air traffic controllers and provide a pay raise for the brave men and women who serve our country in uniform. Each of these bills are stronger because Democrats had a seat at the table. When you look at the differences between what was proposed and what was agreed to, it is astonishing. The White House proposed slashing biomedical research funding at the NIH by $19 billion. We increased funding for the NIH by $450 million. In Labor HHS alone, we rejected more than $50 billion in proposed cuts. The THUD bill is $46 billion more than what the White House proposed. I want my Democratic colleagues to understand that though we may not have gotten every single thing we wanted, these bills are substantially better, I believe, because of our involvement and our collaboration. In addition to more robust funding, this package contains important constraints on the Trump administration. It provides precise funding levels, removing ambiguity that the White House and Russ Vought have sought to exploit in the past. It lays down deadlines to disperse required spending. It provides minimum staffing thresholds to prevent agencies from being hollowed out, and it increases notification requirements to ensure the administration is complying with the laws of the Congress. I'm proud of the work that was done on this package and look forward to supporting it on the floor later this week. Let me take a moment to address the 4th bill before us today, and that is Homeland Security. First, I want to acknowledge some of the improvements included in the bill. Despite President Trump and Secretary Noem's ongoing quest to eliminate FEMA, the Homeland bill increases FEMA funding by $873 million. It increases funding for TSA by $149 million, and it provides pay raise for air traffic controllers as well as uniformed members of the U.S. Coast Guard. These provisions are important, and I am glad that they are in this bill. However, it is impossible to ignore the impact that the violent lawlessness against law-abiding citizens perpetrated by ICE has had on these negotiations. Every day, we are inundated with innumerable videos, reports, and eyewitness counts documenting egregious violations of basic American freedoms by ICE. This conduct demands a forceful response with meaningful constraints on an agency that has clearly become unaccountable. We proposed many such restraints, but our Republican colleagues refused to include almost all of them. And I believe that dictate came from the White House. They rejected proposals to block funds from being used to detain and deport U.S. citizens. They refused to include provisions that would prevent interior operations by non-ICE personnel, prohibiting the border patrol involvement. They blocked our attempts to ensure members of Congress can exercise our lawful oversight of ICE facilities uninhibited. They blocked the training and hiring standards for ICE, and they blocked requiring ICE warrants. They block prohibiting restrictions on recording ICE enforcement operations. By the way, an amendment that was adopted in our full committee in a manager's amendment. Among the provisions we were able to secure are $115 million decrease in ICE enforcement and removal operations funding, a reduction in detention capacity, funding that can only be used for body-worn cameras, and increase in funding for the Office of Inspector General. It is good these measures are included in this bill, but it's clear that more must be done to rein in this rogue agency. I encourage everyone to take a look at what is contained in the Homeland Security bill and determine for themselves what is right for their constituents and their communities. A final note is I was pleased that we were able to have the bipartisan support on community projects, but that both House Democrats and Republicans requested in the bill. It really is directing funds to local communities to support the highest priority infrastructure projects and what the local concerns are. And a final word is that we view our role, and I say this about the chairman, myself, and other members of the Appropriations Committee. Our job is to govern. And I believe that's what we have tried to do over these last several weeks and several months, is to be able to govern, to make sure appropriations bills are on track, that they meet the needs of the American public, that they have hammered out the issues on both sides of the aisle, and that we can come to a conclusion that allows us to be able to govern on behalf of the American public. Again, is it everything that I wanted in a bill? No, that isn't true. And as my colleague, Congressman Cole, has said, we do disagree on issues, but I believe fundamentally it is what we want to do about governing in this nation and governing on behalf of the people of this country. I thank you, and I yield back.
Thank the ranking member. I now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank both of you and for bringing us this legislation. I look forward to supporting it in the committee and on the floor. And I want to speak specifically to the defense appropriations and a couple of things that I think America needs to know are being changed in the way we do things. Number one, Secretary Hegseth has implemented direct reporting. I mean, we can no longer take as long as we have taken to get weapon systems developed. The technology is moving much faster than we were the old ways. And so direct reporting is one of the systems that has been put in that is allowing us to get around the bureaucratic system that has been built at the Pentagon. So thank you for helping with that. Just in here, a couple of quick things: enabling increased competition through elevated defense innovation units and accelerating the procurement and field of innovative technologies investments. I think that's extremely important, especially in today's day and time. We've seen how the Ukrainians have used innovation to give what was believed to be one of the strongest militaries in the world repeated defeats on the battlefield. And necessity breeds innovation. And there's a lot that we actually, as Americans, are going to learn from what the Ukrainians have done and the systems they've put in place. Just a couple of highlights. The multi-year procurement again means the American taxpayers get more for less money. THAADs, Tomahawks. I mean, we have routinely purchased these things in small batches instead of doing multi-year procurements. And we're the largest purchaser in the world of a lot of items, and yet we pay more for it than anybody else in the world sometimes because of the way we've had this bureaucracy built around the purchasing system. So I applaud both of you for working to get around that bureaucracy so that we get more for the same amount of money. And then $6.4 billion for the critical munitions, the money for the solid rocket motor industrial base. That again, that's one of those areas where we don't talk about it a whole lot. But just a few years ago, we as a country, think about this, we were totally dependent on the Russians for rocket launch. Is that correct, Mr. Cole?
That is indeed correct.
And so I applaud both of you for helping us work to systems that are going to make us a safer nation and the world a safer place. And I also want to bring to attention the 3.8% pay raise for all of our service members. And again, I appreciate both of you. I look forward to supporting the legislation on the floor. And Mr. Cole, if there's any additional comments you'd like to add,
I would take the opportunity to make a comment. I want to thank you and your colleagues on the House Armed Services Committee. One of the reasons we were able to do some of the things you ticked off is because you guys always give us an authorization bill. And we had an authorization bill before this came. And so a lot of that work reflects the really fine work on your committee, which tends to be, again, one of the most bipartisan committees in Congress, able to produce a work product that then appropriators can look at and match up with what our numbers are. And frankly, we end up, because authorizers in both the House and the Senate, both sides of the aisle, gave us an authorization in overwhelming numbers. The defense budget's higher by about $7 or $8 billion than it otherwise would have been. But we said, if our authorizers have actually done the work and they tell us this is what we need, then we're going to honor that and go to that level. I mean, we'd save more money, quote unquote, had we not done that, if we just stuck with our numbers. But we really paid attention to what your committee produced. And I know there's a very close working relationship, certainly between Chairman Calvert and Defense Appropriations and Chairman Rogers at HASP, but I also know there's a good relationship with Ranking Member Smith and Ranking Member McCollum as well. And again, if I just say this to all the other committees, because not one of them have given us an authorization of all the various jurisdictions they have. If you will do that, it'll make our job on appropriations a lot easier. And your committee made our job a lot easier. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that. And Adam Smith and Mike Rogers work very closely together. The committee as a whole, I think, takes the job seriously and works closely together. And that, again, thank you for this. And I yield any remaining time, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman from Georgia, and I'll recognize the ranking member, Mr. McGovern.
Thank you. Again, I appreciate the hard work that both of you and all the appropriation staff on both sides of the aisle put into this. Again, I just want to reiterate a point. I think this process could have been better. And that's not a reflection on you. It's a reflection, quite frankly, on the Speaker and the leadership in this Congress. You know, there are, I mean, 3/4 of the appropriation bills that are being brought forward have not been subject to an amendment process in the full House. And we have a lot of people testifying today because, you know, their voices weren't recognized and weren't heard, and they have deep concerns. And for the life of me, I don't understand why, when the government was shut down, why the Speaker sent everybody home. I mean, we could have done this work, and we could have accommodated lots and lots of members with their amendments, and we could have had debates. Again, you see a whole bunch of people coming here today, wanting to offer an amendment. And my guess, my prediction is that this will either be a closed rule, or it'll be a rule that will take care of one or two Republican amendments who are threatening to vote against the rule. But it won't reflect the kind of process that we had when you were chairman of this committee, where, under both Democrats and Republicans in the past, again, there was much more participation. And I also don't like the fact that, you're bunching defense with labor HHS and the transportation HUD bill. I mean, I appreciate and I understand, the improvements in labor HHS. I understand the improvements in transportation HUD. But I got a real problem with defense. I really do. Not just because it's more than the administration even asked for, but because, going back to what I said in the beginning, the rules that we have all kind of played by over the years no longer exist. I look at the defense appropriations bill as maybe the last opportunity to prevent this administration from doing something crazy in Greenland, or attacking NATO, or doing something that we all know is a bad thing to do. And yeah, I feel a little bit relieved that he today said, "Oh, I'm not going to use force," but I don't trust him. I'm just telling you. I mean, they told us before we went on Christmas break that they weren't going to be involved militarily in Venezuela, and when we're on Christmas break, he went into Venezuela. I don't know what he thinks one day to the next. And writing letters that he's upset that he didn't get the Nobel Prize, and therefore, that they should give him Greenland as a consolation prize is nuts. This is crazy. And I really think that we're at a moment where we all have to recognize that some of the stuff he's saying is not only dangerous, it's just way out there. It's not normal. And so, yeah, a lot of us believe that just to be safe, there ought to be constraints. I mean, there are a number of amendments here, saying that no funds can be used to go into Greenland. No funds can be used to attack a NATO ally. I mean, I was listening to his speech today. I mean, he was talking about Greenland and Iceland. I don't know what he wants to invade, Greenland or Iceland or any land that's an ally. I don't even know. I don't think he knows. But I really think that it is responsible, even for those who support this president, to say that, we need to put some checks and balances in place. And one of the biggest, disappointments to me has been how this House of Representatives, this Congress, has forfeited its constitutional powers and authority time and time and time again. It's just a really bad precedent. So that's my, you could have had 3 separate votes and tied all the appropriation bills that passed together in final passage. But it makes it really difficult for some of us who are deeply, deeply and genuinely concerned about what might happen with regard to NATO, what might happen in Greenland, just to kind of go along to get along. I'm just being honest with you. And it'd be nice if we could make some of these amendments in order and let the House vote its will. But again, I'm under no illusion that will happen. And then on Homeland Security, I can't be there. I have, and here's the deal. Not only what I've witnessed, in terms of ISIS behavior, by the way, not just in Minnesota, but even in Massachusetts and in other states, that just is unacceptable. Papers, please. Asking American citizens, papers, please, is not freedom. Being fearful of a heavily armed, masked, group of U.S. forces is not democracy. And all of us agree that criminals and people who commit terrible crimes should be held to account. But, you know, we have U.S. citizens that are being detained. I was visiting I did a hearing with my colleague Ayanna Presley in Everett, Massachusetts, on the issue of food security. And we were at a supermarket that is owned by a Colombian, a U.S. citizens who came from Colombia. And they're telling us that U.S. citizens, you know, who look like they're immigrants or who speak different languages are afraid to come into the supermarket because they're afraid they will be questioned, you know, or apprehended by ICE. I mean, this is just wrong. So, you know, I'm not here to ask any questions. I'm just here to tell you that there are a lot of members, and by the way, Republican members too, who want to offer amendments. It'd be nice if they were accommodated. But you know, this could have been different. I mean, if we had not given away all that month, had we just stayed here and did other work, I think we would. I think there'd be a lot, many more members satisfied. But just understand, bringing what defense has to do with labor, HHS, or you know, or transportation HUD. I don't get. I get the minibus angle, sitting over the Senate, but there were other ways to do it. But some of us really, you know, who have had a hard time supporting the defense appropriations bill in the past for whatever reasons, our feeling of concern is more intense than ever before. I just don't trust what might this president. I don't know what's going to unfold in the next few days. I still think the NATO alliance is worth keeping. I think invading Greenland is stupid. I think it's all about ego. But in any event, I don't mean any of these comments to reflect on you two individually or your staffs. It's just like, I mean, at some point, some of my friends on the other side of the aisle have to take control. And I don't know what it's going to take, but boy, the alarm bell should be going off. And I thank you, and I yield back.
Thank the ranking member. I'll now recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Norman.
Thank both of you for your work on this. You know, this is, you mentioned what concerns you, Mr. McGovern. You know what concerns me is when I see an earmark. When I see an earmark that I think pushed by Mr. Schumer, $500,000 for legal aid for immigrants. When I see an earmark.
And what's wrong with that?
For big handout for corporate socialized housing activists, $3 million, Fifth Avenue Committee, which is basically just a activist group. When I see a earmark, children's gender surgeries, $2 million. You know, this is what, you know, the list goes on and on that are bad things about this. That's what I'm concerned about. And the fact that, you know, we're having to even deal with this, even though I think overall this is a good bill. I like the Golden Dome. I like the aid to Israel. I like the aid to helping our allies, which the Biden administration totally, they left out our friends, our democracies. But, you know, I think the next time we get a shot at this, and hopefully we'll get back to regular order, we'll be able to cut some of this frivolous spending that the Democrats are going to continue to do. And it's abominable. It's an abomination what they're doing to the ICE agents. What they're putting the ICE agents under, the attacks they're having is unbelievable. But keep it up. I think the American people see it. I think the 77 million people that voted for Donald Trump is even getting stronger. And so, but thank you for your work on this. I don't have any real questions other than, you know, I'm concerned about the earmarks, the handouts, the giveaways, and we're 38 trillion in debt. But appreciate your work on this. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. Ms. Scanlon, you're recognized.
Thank you. I want to join the ranking member in thanking Ranking Member DeLauro and Chairman Cole for joining us for a third week here in Rules. You know, you might as well rejoin the committee, Mr. Cole. But while I deeply appreciate your efforts and the very difficult circumstances you're operating under, I am so disappointed that the 4 bills that we have before us today don't meet the moment that we're in. I mean, either the needs of the American people or Congress's need to reclaim its role as a co-equal branch of government and as a check and balance on an out-of-control White House. Today, Trump threatened our NATO allies in Davos with pledges to take Greenland, if not by force, then by economic extortion. The cost of living, including housing, groceries, utilities, childcare, healthcare, is straining family budgets. Deadly diseases like measles that were once almost eradicated are surging again as RFK Jr. rejects science and eliminates vaccine guidelines. And of course, ICE is continuing to terrorize American communities, treating American citizens like enemy combatants, tear gassing babies, shooting protesters, arresting citizens, and detaining both citizens and non-citizens in deplorable conditions and in violation of their fundamental rights. With each passing day, the Trump White House comes up with a new way to trample on the Constitution and ethical guardrails. And with this torrent of bad news, it's easy for people to forget that none of this is normal. So I get that we're operating under constrained political circumstances. I get that these bills are the best that our appropriators can put together while maintaining bipartisan support. I recognize that in the THUD and the labor HHS bills specifically, Democrats secured valuable funding for agencies under attack by the Trump administration. But I can't endorse the actions of the Trump administration. I can't support legislation that's going to effectively lock in a lot of the DOJ cuts, the administration's illegal firings of federal employees, shuttering of the Department of Education, elimination of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. I can't support legislation that condones the president's war on children and families, which has cut healthcare, food assistance, education, and programs to keep our streets safe in order to provide massive tax cuts to big business and billionaires. And while the defense title does include some statutory restrictions on use of funds, it's not going to prevent Trump from committing more extrajudicial killings or illegally reprogramming funds, as he did during the shutdown. How do we support a defense bill when the president is actively threatening our NATO allies and using U.S. armed forces to run a global protection racket? And the Homeland bill, I mean, there's no way we can support this bill. I don't want another shutdown, but the actions being performed in the name of Americans using taxpayer dollars should horrify all of us. More than 30 people have died in DHS custody in the last year. Last weekend, one of them was one of my constituents, someone who developed a medical issue and by all reports, other than the DHS official reports, was denied medical care that might have saved his life. We've all seen the rogue masked and armed federal agents that ICE has unleashed on our streets. Last Friday, 28 members of Congress from 18 states went to Minnesota to hear from local officials, law enforcement, school officials, and civic leaders. And what we heard and saw is what's been on the news, that ICE has tear gassed babies, shot protesters. ICE agents are patrolling Target parking lots, knocking on people's windows and demanding to know where they were born. Gangs of masked and armed ICE agents are going door to door in neighborhoods in military gear, asking, where are the Asians? I mean, they've arrested and detained American citizens, held people, including children, at gunpoint. They've illegally raided people's homes and private property without warrants, sometimes going to the wrong house and pulling people out of the wrong house. It's an astounding failure of moral leadership for this Congress to use taxpayer dollars to fund the abuse of American citizens and non-citizens alike. So I'm disappointed that our Republican colleagues can't see this for what it is, whether they genuinely support what ICE is doing or they're just scared of the president. Either way, they've blocked every effort to rein in ICE, and so therefore I can't support that bill. So while I very, very much appreciate the hard work of our appropriators and particularly their beleaguered staff, I obviously have huge problems with this legislation. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Mr. Roy, you're recognized.
I thank the chair, and I want to thank, as I did last week, the chairman and the ranking member, and appreciate getting here to the place where we are, where I think now, if we're able to get these done in the next week and the Senate agrees, the overall spending is, I think, about $17 billion under the CR level spending, statistically flat, but under. I think that is a important signal to the markets, understanding of where we are in terms of our overall debt load as a country, that we're trying to constrain the discretionary side. After we did some work last year on trying to restrain mandatory, particularly with respect to fraud and abuse, that we're trying to address in Medicaid. I know there's been disagreements on that issue, but I'm trying to look at the overall fiscal situation. And I think, while not perfect, and the ranking member left because a rare moment of slight modest agreement, I would note that I share, and I mentioned this before, my concern that this is barely a toe in the water to regular order. But I want to recognize that it is a trajectory towards regular order, and that is a good thing. And I appreciate all of our efforts in getting to this place. I hope we can continue to expand upon that, and to where, this form of regular order is still effectively a four corners deal with a $1.2 trillion spend on 4 appropriations bills, 3 in a minibus and 1 independent. But it did go through a lot of process. We've had a lot of significant independent votes through committee, working with the Senate. I hope next year we can get closer to the 12 pass, 12 back and forth. I would note, and there's a degree to which this is looking in the mirror on all of the issues in which we do this, and you seek the leverage points that you can to effectuate change. But I would note that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, there was fairly loud rattling about wanting to jam DHS appropriations with respect to ICE. Well, that begs the question strategically about then how do you proceed? Are you going to end up at a CR, or are you going to end up trying to put together a minibus? So those of us who want individual bills for purposes of getting to better order and amendments, when we say we're going to, and again, looking in the mirror, when we say we're going to kill that particular appropriation bill, then it leaves the leadership on both sides of the aisle no choice but to figure out how to package together either an omnibus minibus or a version of a CR. So I would just note that that's another component to regular order. I do think when we have regular order, the pressure relief valves are such that you get votes on amendments, you have your voice, you get to speak, and then you get to be able to say, fine, I lost, and then go vote for the final product. When you don't, then you feel jammed, and you say, look, I'm not going to vote for this bill because it's got X, Y, Z in it that I don't particularly like. So that having all been said about regular order, I would note, and I wasn't going to go down this road, and I won't go down it too far because I've spoken about it on the floor. I understand, we're in here to talk about the overall appropriations bill, but DHS is one of those, or Homeland is one of those. And when we talk about ICE, and we talk about the men and women in ICE and what they're doing, whatever one wants to say about any particular events and allowing for a full review of any events that occur, the fact of the matter is ICE is on the street trying to protect the people of this country. And when we talk about the individuals that they have stopped in Minnesota, we're talking about a Laotian illegal alien convicted of sexual assault and sodomy of a girl under 13, who's been under a deportation order since 2006. A Laotian illegal alien convicted of the strong-arm rape of a 12-year-old girl and kidnapping a child with intent to sexually assault her with a deportation order since 2004. I keep going down the list. I'm not going to use the time for effect. I've got a list of 20 people right here who are very, very bad people who are no longer on the streets of Minnesota because ICE was engaged in carrying out their duty. So we can debate an act and go through due process and review and so forth about any particular act. I've got my views on some of those things, but go through all that. We do it in law and order all the time. We do it in police departments. We do it in states. We do it federally. We should. But to categorically dismiss, undermine, and put in danger the people of ICE when they're out here pulling by, I haven't heard anybody refute this, that these individuals are terrible human beings on the streets carrying out heinous and vicious acts and crimes, and that they should be removed from the street. That there are, in fact, 1.5 million people in the United States currently under orders of removal. Went through the process that Congress created to allow for going through the judges, they now have 1.5 million people with orders of removal that ICE is supposed to go remove. I just think we should be mindful of that while we're going through the appropriations process and talking about funding the department to go do and carry out their jobs. I support them. I will take under advisement all these things as I look through the bills. There's still some provisions I'm not overly fond of. This is the process. We're negotiating, working through it. I do concur again, ever so carefully, with the ranking member about my stronger preference for more amendments and that this is only a toe in the water of regular order and that we should have greater regular order. I've already commented on it. The gentleman missed it when I was.
No, can you repeat it one more time, just for emphasis?
Well, I will. So what I said before, but I'm over the time and I want to respect the chairwoman's admonition that we be expeditious, is I would note that we have to look in the mirror that when we are threatening killing a bill, because we don't like the bill, then one of the appropriations bills, then it necessarily results in a minibus, omnibus, or CR. So that was one of the issues at play here. That doesn't get to the heart of the amendment issue. Like, we have to be willing to vote and accept votes that are tough and that might change the product one way or the other. And partisan, we're going to not want certain votes, and I get that. And both sides of the House will do that. But bottom line is, this is closer, and I appreciate the efforts of the chairman and the ranking member, and we'll try to work through this. Now, yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Neguse, you're recognized.
I think the chairwoman, I just have to say before I pose a couple of questions to the chairman and the ranking member, but to respond to my colleague from Texas. For years, I've heard my colleagues make passionate defenses of liberty and our constitutional freedoms, our rights under the Fourth Amendment. It is beyond the pale that they now stand silent as we see the images in the videos of American citizens, naturalized citizens, being thrown into ICE detention. It's outrageous. Outrageous. And it is irresponsible of the Congress, in light of what we see happening from coast to coast, to push forward a bill that does nothing to prevent these abuses. Chairman Cole, do you know how many people died in ICE custody last month?
No.
6 people died in ICE custody in the month of December. It was the deadliest month in the history of the agency. Do you know how many people died in ICE custody in 2025?
No.
32 people died in ICE custody last year, the deadliest year since 2004. The bill you proposed here includes no new standards, no new reforms to prevent these types of deaths from happening in the future, correct?
No, I don't think that is correct. There's body cams, there's additional training and de-escalation. There are genuine efforts to try and protect everybody. So no, I would not agree with that statement.
Madam Ranking Member, you care to expound?
Well, let me just say, we proposed, in my opening statement, but we have an agency that I believe has gone rogue. I need to make some very important points about people who have died in custody. But we asked for what I viewed as not irresponsible reforms, a prohibition on detaining or deporting U.S. citizens. It seems that that would be pretty fundamental. We asked for training and hiring standards, that prohibiting the department from changing its hiring and training requirements from requirements that were in place under the prior administration. So that there were a number, actually prohibiting restrictions on recording ICE enforcement operations that we proposed. The chair is right on, there's limited use of body cams, which is all to the good. But this
Is there a requirement, Madam Ranking Member, to use the body cams?
No.
No.
It is not a requirement.
Correct.
That's right. No.
So that's going back,
That's an
Mr. Cole.
important point.
The
Right.
point here
Right. It's not.
is, in light of the abuses that
Right, and we asked for a prohibition on the use of border patrol, that they not be engaged in the interior enforcement. Anyway, there were a raft of reforms that we thought were reasonable reforms in trying to move forward, and they were rejected.
Mr. Cole, what is your objection to language preventing ICE from arresting naturalized citizens?
Look, we put together the best bill we could that could get support from both sides of the aisle. We granted our friends a separate vote on this bill because we understand how.
What is your objection? Do you disagree with it?
Look, I don't even remember that offer, to tell you the truth. I've been dealing with 12 bills for a long time, so I don't recall it. I don't doubt it was made. I don't question it, but I don't recall it. I do recall the body cam and the training issues, and we discussed those through. So again, and most of these decisions were actually made at the subcommittee level. Honestly,
I appreciate that you two were here to testify on the whole bill. So
yeah,
I understand that, and
well,
we
it's
don't have
actually
the
one of the keys to success.
subcommittee
It
cardinals here.
may not be the appropriate way to interject, but we pushed as many decisions down as we could on both sides of the aisle. The reason being that, number one, our most informed people on the issue on each side of the aisle are on the subcommittees. They're not up. And I will just tell you, from having been around appropriations for a long time, every level you move it up, the decision becomes less informed and more political, because the people actually know one another.
I would simply say,
know the issue. So
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
so I do
I'll
not
do-
recall this
I hear
particular
you,
discussion.
and I will say that I think that question deserves an answer. I wish we had the subcommittee chairman here so that I could pose that question to him. But in any event, I have other questions for you, at
Mr.
least
Negotiator,
more broadly. Yes.
I could just say that, and I think that, as the chairman pointed out, the higher up you go, that they are more political decisions. And quite frankly, I believe that some of the rejection efforts came from Stephen Miller and from the White House, rather than it being discussed. Now that's, but we're faced with that, and we put together, the bill that you can. You go as far as you can, and then you one way or another. But I believe that politicization of the effort and not looking at reasonableness in some of these efforts came from a different level.
Yeah, and I don't think this is particularly complicated. I think when you have an agency in which more people have died in its custody at any time in the last 25 years, when you have an agency in which just last month you have the deadliest month in the history of the agency, 6 people dying in its custody, that appropriating $10.3 billion more to that agency is not in the best interest of the American people. That is not complicated to me. Do I have that number right, Mr. Cole, that it's $10.3 billion? I want to make sure I got the number right.
Yes,
Okay.
and no, because when you say appropriate, that's not an increase. That's a flat
I
funding.
understand. Flat funding. I get that. That's your argument. That's
but
fine.
I think that's an important distinction. They're not getting more money through the appropriations
You are
process.
appropriating $10.3 billion.
That's
for the remainder.
correct.
Okay, so
That's correct.
tell me,
And
Mr.
can
Cole,
I add one other thing, if
I
I
didn't ask
may?
a question.
Well,
I haven't asked a question. I will ask you.
no, I thought you had, actually. You've asked me several.
I said, is it $10.3 billion? Is that the number in this bill? You said yes. Okay. That $10.3 billion, who profits?
What do you mean by profit?
Who profits from that $10.3 billion?
The American
allocation to
people
ICE?
profit
The
from it
American
by
people
better
profit.
security.
Do any
That's
private
why. Do you
companies
want to talk about the number of assaults against ICE
Do any
agents?
private
The
companies
number of people
profit?
that are up enormously.
Mr. Cole,
And by the way, if you're worried about security, thank God we have a secure border for a change.
do any private
There's not
companies-
12,000 people a day coming across it anymore.
I hear you.
Some of whom are criminals, some of whom are bringing drugs. And they are
you've
dealing with some of those people
You-
that came during the
I'll
Biden
reclaim my time.
administration.
I think I'm surprised that you won't answer it honestly. I think the ranking
I think
member
I
will.
did answer
Do
it
any
honestly.
private companies profit from the $10.3 billion that is allocated to ICE in this bill? Do they profit? Do any private corporations profit from this bill? Mr. Chairman, if you don't know the answer,
I have
you can
no
say, don't
idea.
know. I can tell you the answer. The answer is yes. Dramatic profits, record profits. Have you heard of a company called GEO Group?
No.
It's the largest private contractor for ICE in the United States. This is a news release from their third quarter announcing record profits by virtue of the money that Republicans allocated in the reconciliation bill last year. I'm going to quote, this is from their CEO. Since the beginning of the year, we have entered into new or expanded contracts that represent over $400 million in new incremental annualized revenues that are already under contract and are expected to normalize in 2026. This represents the largest amount of new business we have won in a single year in our company's history. He's talking about the appropriations that Republicans are championing, both in the reconciliation bill and now this $10.3 billion to add to the slush fund that ICE already has. That's where the money is going, to for-profit companies. The Brennan Center has described this as a detention and deportation industrial complex. That is what you all have created. They are making money hand over fist. And I think it's reprehensible. And I think this Congress ought to do something about it. And it's clear to me this bill does nothing on that front. I will move on to final subject and question regarding NATO. Chairman, you've been in Congress a long time. You have championed the NATO alliance. I assume you agree with me that it is not in the best interests of the United States for our country to be taking military steps to acquire Greenland.
I agree.
And if anything, you've expressed grave concerns on that front.
I do. Well, I don't think we're going to be using military means in this regard. So I don't have great concerns about it, but I certainly agree it would be inappropriate to do so.
There's an amendment that was proposed by Mr. Keating.
I'm not going to judge amendments. I don't have a vote on this panel.
Well, there is an effort afoot in the Congress to put simple language in this bill that makes clear that the appropriation to the Department of Defense cannot be used to attack a NATO ally. Why is that controversial?
There's actually very strong language in this bill extolling the importance and the value of NATO. It's in there.
I'm
It's
sure,
in the bill.
Donald Trump
So
is going to take that with great, great consideration that House Republicans are extolling the value
I'm
of NATO.
trying to
He seems
answer
be
your
listening.
question, that there is language in here that affirms the importance and how critical NATO is. And I think that is then kind of understood. And that's a point, frankly, that worked on with the ranking member
Well,
and our
like I said,
colleagues in the United States Senate, that was the statement that they wanted.
And
And we agreed with them.
I imagine
So
that a
that
month from
statement
now-
is in the bill about the importance
I
of
will
NATO.
simply close. We've been here before. And a month from now, when this administration takes another unlawful and unconstitutional action, maybe this time in Greenland, we'll point back to the language that you all fought to secure that extols the virtues of NATO as the basis for the administration deciding that at the end of the day, they don't really need to worry about the Congress and the Congress's ability to rein in the administration from taking steps that would violate the Constitution. That's my view, and I'll be voting against the bill for that reason. I yield back. All right, I yield to the gentleman from Pennsylvania for a unanimous consent request.
Sure.
Thank you.
Ms. Scanlon.
Just with respect to some comments Mr. Roy made, I wanted to seek unanimous consent to enter into the record an article from Minnesota Public Radio about criminals that ICE is taking credit for arresting who are already in Minnesota prisons. Many of the ones that they're claiming are taking the worst of the worst off the streets. In fact, more than half of a recent report were people that were turned over because they were already in prison. So that's January 17, 2026, Minnesota Public Radio.
Without objection, Ms. Scanlon.
Okay, one other from the Washington Post
Yes, ma'am.
today. ICE is targeting off-duty police officers in the Twin Cities, stopping people of color who serve in law enforcement in the Twin Cities. And so that's from today from the Washington Post.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon, without objection.
Thank you.
And I would note that we just did a very, very quick search of the company GEO, and GEO was employed during the Obama and Biden administration also. Now, I will recognize Mr. Scott. You already recognized.
Madam Chair, I've already, but since you recognize, I would ask unanimous consent
Unanimous
to insert into the record an article from just a minute ago from The Hill. Trump agrees to framework deal on Greenland, clawing back European tariffs. So the Greenland issue's over with. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Scott.
And the world is better off with Maduro in prison. Agreed? Agreed?
Ms. Fishbach, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just have to respond. I wasn't actually going to talk about it necessarily, but the other side continues to demonize all ICE agents, every one of them. And let's remember, ICE agents have been attacked with broomsticks and shovels, and they're under attack in Minneapolis. And I'm the only one from Minnesota here. So, I speak from being, I haven't been down in Minneapolis. I don't participate in that, but from talking to constituents and talking to other people in Minnesota, they are under attack, not only on the streets, but they are under attack by all of the Democrats who refuse to support them. And Mr. Roy had started out talking a little bit about the kinds of folks and that they are arresting. And, just in my district, So in my district in rural Minnesota, an illegal alien from Mexico arrested for molestation of a minor, illegal alien from Mexico arrested for rape, arrested in Olivia for possession of methamphetamines, arrested for sexual assault and sodomy of a girl. I am glad these folks are off the street. And we need to let them do their job. It is making our streets safer. It is taking those kinds of folks, people who are attacking our children, sodomizing children, are off the street. And as a Minnesotan, I want it to be safer. As an American, I want it to be safer. So I appreciate what is going on and that they are getting those folks off of the streets. And as for the bill, I am happy that we are back to regular order. And I don't know a lot about basketball, but I thought about this is the Final Four. So I appreciate all of the hard work that's been done, and I do think we are getting back to regular order, and I appreciate that. And I'm happy to be able to pass these last 4 bills. And I think you were here when was maybe at the very beginning when you did the first few bills, and you said we're going to have them passed by January 30th. And in my head, I kind of laughed, and I thought, yeah, right. But you were right, and I am very happy that we are going to get these done. And so I appreciate that. And Madam Chair, I yield back.
Madam Chair? Yes, sir. Just for the record, this is not regular order. I'm sorry to tell you. No, it isn't. I mean, three-fourths of these bills have never gone through an amendment process. That's what regular order is supposed to be. This is far from it. And if the gentlelady thinks this is regular order, this is a new standard. Boy, we're going in the wrong direction here. But I thank the Chair for yielding.
Yes, sir. Ms. Leisure Fernandez, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. Every time it comes up how many people who have criminal convictions that have been arrested by ICE, I think you hear Democrats saying, we have no problem with ICE arresting and focusing on criminals. But that's not what we're seeing. And in fact, last Rules meeting, I pointed out that Obama has actually deported more immigrants than we've seen under Trump. But what he did was go after those who actually had criminal convictions. And we hear of the same 2 examples coming out of Minnesota. But we've heard them boast that maybe they've arrested 10,000 people in Minnesota under the surge, even under their own records, and a Fox News analysis of this, and a Cato News analysis of this. At the most, it's 5% of the people arrested have any kind of criminal conviction. I'm very concerned about, and Chairman Cole, you and I share this. I'm concerned about the fact that there were 4 Oglala Sioux tribal members arrested. I don't know if you are aware of that case. And there's been a Navajo man arrested in Arizona. He offered to give them his tribal ID. He offered to give them his CIB. Now, Chairman Cole, how many people know what a CIB is? What is it?
Not many, probably you and me.
What is it?
It's a designation of your tribal blood quantum.
Right. And if you have tribal blood quantum and you're a federally recognized member of a federally recognized Indian tribe, are you a citizen of the United States?
Yes.
You're a citizen of the United States. And should you be required to walk around as a citizen of the United States with your tribal ID and your identification of blood quantum so that you don't get arrested and detained and thrown into a detention center?
I would not think so.
You would not think so. Should a citizen be required to walk around with their birth certificate or passport to avoid being arrested and thrown in a detention center?
No.
No. But that is happening over and over again. And that is the problem that Democrats have with this bill. And that is the problem that Democrats have with what Trump is doing. Because they arrested that Navajo man. And you and I know this because he was brown. They arrested him because of what he looked like. They arrested the Oglala Nation Sioux people because of what they looked like. The color of their skin. And that is absolutely not right. It is a violation of the Constitution. It's a violation of who we are as a people. And that's what our problem is with this bill. And I don't see anything in here that provides any constraints on ICE to not keep doing this. Is there anything in here, Ranking Member, that constrains ICE from not arresting citizens?
On that particular issue, no, we fought to have that included in the bill, but that was rejected. And I would repeat, I think that rejection did not come from the subcommittee or from the full committee, but I believe it came from a higher place, including the White House and Stephen Miller, who has a different view. I mean, I believe that we all are in agreement that U.S. citizens should not be detained and deported, nor should they have to walk around carrying your birth certificate, your passport. You know, I have a grandson who was, that we adopted when he was 8 months old. He is from Guatemala, and he's an American citizen. And today at age 18, to be very honestly, I called him, I spoke to him, and I said, please, Teo, carry your passport with you, carry your information with you, because I'm concerned and I'm afraid that they would just see him and see the color of his skin, he's brown, and that he would say, and I say that with all, you know, with a lot of emotion. So I think that's where we need to have red lines and boundaries and accountability and guarantees that really help to make a difference when you are trying, in fact, to look at criminals. I don't have a problem with, you know, people have a criminal reputation, a criminal background or issues. And that was one of the issues with regard to a warrant for a person. But to be just willy-nilly and just a dragnet of picking up people because of the profiling and what they look like is un-American, and it does not speak to the values of this great nation.
You know, the Navajo individual, he said when he offered to get them the tribal ID and the CIB, he said, you must be stealing someone's identity and we would get your family next. And then this is the words of the Navajo individual. I was treated as if we haven't earned our place here. This is our place. This is beyond racism. They hate us like we were pests and rodents in their home, but this is our home and always has been. And I think it's this concept of who they are. And I'm looking over at Mr. Scott, and in that big, beautiful bill, we authorized to give $500,000 to 8 senators just because they had their telephone records disclosed. And he was against that. But what we have over at ICE is they have no accountability. And they're saying we have absolute immunity. And when you think you have absolute immunity, you are no consequences. And when there are no consequences, this is the kind of stuff they do. Over and over, 170 citizens, Mr. Chairman, as of October. That's not just the ones in the latest surge. Why aren't we giving them the ability to get compensation when they've been detained, when they've been arrested, when they've been shot and killed? This is what is wrong with what is happening with ICE. It's the idea of accountability and reform. And that's what we are complaining about up here, not about the few individuals that should be arrested, detained, and deported. We don't have a problem with that. We have the problem with the fact that they are going after anybody who they think.
And transparency.
Transparency. And then we don't know, right? And then the whole idea that they can stop you for protesting, for exercising your right to protest, to film. Why should you get shot in the face because you're filming ICE? Why should anybody get shot in the face? And there's actually protocols. There are protocols that are ICE's own protocols that they're not supposed to be doing what they're doing, but they're ignoring that. They're ignoring court orders because they think there is no accountability. And that's our problem, that there is no accountability built into this legislation. Now, the last Democrats, or I always like to vote, Mr. Chair, I know I gave you some time, but I always like to give our ranking member, is there anything else you'd like to add to this?
Well, you know, the emphasis is on the Homeland Security bill, in which I laid out a whole lot of issues. I think there were several pieces of which we can point to that have to do with Coast Guard, that have to do with FEMA, that have to do with a TSA, and that are good pieces and are improvements to the bill. I think what unfortunately has happened is that the ICE issue, as it has unfolded, has created a specter of fear, of anger, of I should say detention. There's a young man who's 21 years old. He was interviewed. A rubber bullet has hit him in the eye, and he now is blind in one eye. He was, standing with the protesters, but he wasn't doing anything violent. But he was shot at, and now for the rest of his life, he's blind in one eye. And the woman who was killed, the people you talk about being detained, there has to be guardrails. And we tried, and I think that there was, and quite frankly, while there's some good things, we did not succeed in that portion of the bill in order to place the accountability, the enforcement, the transparency that you've spoken about, and leaving, in my view, at risk U.S. citizens, leaving at risk people who are here, who are now frightened to leave their homes, frightened to go out, frightened to, to move for fear that they will be detained. And again, if somebody has a criminal record and a deportation order and so forth, well, my God, move forward. But that is not what we see is happening. And to say that the agents are immune from any kind of investigation or any kind of, that is, again, is not the American way. And it isn't true, I would say this to Mrs. Fishback, that every Democrat thinks that ICE and doesn't realize, that, hey, amongst all groups, there are people who really who breach the law, breach the wall, just go beyond what they should be doing. That needs to be considered in this regard, and that is what we are asking with regard to this bill. But again, I think we tried to move forward on a bill and leave people. I think everyone has to pay a close attention to what is in the bill, what they can view as positive or negative, and come to a conclusion about where they want to be on the bill. It is complicated when you're both trying to govern and you're trying to resist what may be infringements, that to thread that needle and to try to be able to move forward in a way. But I think the examples, I don't think that there's any doubt in anyone's mind, particularly in the minds of the American people, that something has gone awry here, that this is bad. This is not.
Yeah, we should
what
not
the
be having 32 people die in
or
detention.
6 people die in December in custody. There's something very, very wrong. But what is more wrong, I believe, is an inability to say, okay, let's examine it. Let's look at it. Let's shine a light on it. Let's fix it, because we need to be looking at who is illegal and who's coming across and who's a criminal and so forth. But we need to make sure that American citizens and people who are here legally and who have not transgressed have the sense and that feeling that, when you express what the Navajo man said, that they are not to be disposed of. They are not be considered of who they are and what their contribution is to this nation. That's wrong. And that is not who the American people are. I don't believe that they support that kind of effort. Do they want to be safe? Yes. Is it our responsibility to make them feel safe? Yes. But it's not our responsibility. It is our responsibility to make sure that they are safe.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member. And I would note that a majority of Americans believe that you can be now, are worried, not believe, are worried that they could get arrested even though they're citizens. We should not live in that kind of fear. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank Chairman Cole and Ranking Member DeLauro for being here today, for moving this minibus package. Is a real step away from, as we've said before, from years of Washington dysfunction and passing these bills, especially with what I believe is responsible governing and return to some fiscal sanity. The minibus does include 4 bills: defense, homeland security, labor, HHS, education, and transportation, housing, and urban development. And together they focus federal funding on priorities that matter for our communities, strengthening military readiness, supporting our service members, reinforcing border security, and combating the spread of fentanyl. We're investing in rural health and workforce training for working families and improving transportation safety while ensuring our tax dollars are spent responsibly. I also want to highlight that this package delivers tangible results for my district back home. I was proud to secure $7 million in community project funding in this package for Indiana's 9th District, targeting investments in things that taxpayers will need and use, like street safety improvements and upgrades. While it is a strong win for the district, I'll admit it still comes in a very close, second place to our Indiana University Hoosiers, bringing home the National Football Championship this past weekend. Chairman Cole, this bill provides $418 million for rural health, including increased funding for rural hospitals and expanded rural residency opportunities. Can you talk about how this investment will help keep rural hospitals open and strengthen our access to care?
Well, I certainly will a little bit. I have a very rural district myself, and anybody that represents areas like that, Democrat, Republican alike, know how difficult it is to maintain infrastructure. Distance does make a difference in terms of how quickly care can be delivered, and the fewer access points into the health system there are, the more challenge there is. So this is an effort to, again, try and upgrade infrastructure and, frankly, create incentives for people that are to come back, doctors, nurses, the kind of personnel infrastructure you need in addition to, just the physicality of buildings and equipment. So again, it's something that I think important investment and one that's worth making. And so that's basically it.
Thank you. And Chairman Cole, one thing I appreciate is that this bill doesn't just spend money, it demands efficiency in the programs. And on the defense bill, it cuts over $1.2 billion through streamlining and management improvements, and cuts another $550 million, reflecting favorable bulk fuel rates. Can you explain how these savings were achieved without sacrificing our readiness or warfighting capacity?
A lot of that is, again, as I mentioned earlier, is based on the good work of the House Armed Services Committee. We appropriate based on a lot, and they are a singular committee in that they always give us an authorization bill. Everything within their purview is authorized, has been for 60 odd years. Didn't matter if Democrats were running the place or Republicans were running the place. That committee does its work. I've got other committees where as much as 90% of the money is unauthorized. I mean, we're going to appropriate it, and I'll give you an example. If you don't appropriate for the State Department, and I want to particularly single out for praise Chairman Mast, who's beginning the process of reauthorization there. But every embassy would shut down. There wouldn't be any visas, there wouldn't be any passports. So we can't, just because an authorizing committee doesn't reauthorize the State Department, we can't quit funding it. But we have that in every other committee, defense. Again, doesn't matter if a Democrat's chairing, there's a culture in that committee that they're going to get an NDAA done. And so, again, while we do, I think, exceptional work, I mean, two of our very best members, Chairman Calvert and Ranking Member McCollum, who work together on other committees as well, both terrific members. And they're always at the cutting edge. They know their subject matter. So I have no doubt they played their role in that too. But again, this is an example of a good relationship between an authorizing committee and the appropriate subcommittee of appropriations that work hand in glove.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate all the hard work, both sides that went into this. Yes, to the ranking member.
I just want to say a thank you to you for talking about the $7 million in the district. I think one of the great successes of the appropriations bills and those that have community projects are so reflective of the, your district and the folks in here, you know it best. And I think when I, listen to what you said, I was, just before we came back down here, I was in West Haven, Connecticut with the firefighters. Small, $348,000 for equipment and apparatus. Well, my God, you had every fire chief in the area, all the fire, and saying thank you, because it saves their lives and so forth. And I think this is on both sides of the aisle, the recognition that these are beneficial. And we've tried very, very carefully to make sure what has happened in the past does not happen in the present or in the future by building the bridges to nowhere. So I really do thank you for that. And my last comment has to do with, there was a real understanding that there were specific issues related to Homeland Security, where the developments in the last several weeks have really, jarred all sides in a very fundamental way. And it was one of the reasons why, and with the chair and myself and the Senate, not the Senate, it's the House, where we made the determination that what members had to do was to very carefully look at the bill, look at where there were gains made, look at where there were none, whether there were some, and so forth, and make the decision to move forward. And which is one of the reasons why the bill is separate, because of the complexity of it, because of the environment in which it was being done. And I think there was a sensitivity to all of that. And that, I think, is important as to how we do try to move forward. So
thank you. We say this a lot around the House of Representatives, there is no perfect bill. And if you can get 80% of what you want, that's a pretty good day around here. If you can get some of what you want, that's an okay day. But you're never probably in this business going to get 100% your way. We've picked the wrong job if that's the case. In closing, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the ranking member. In closing, I just have to say, Gloriana, Frangipana, hail to old IU.
I don't know, I might have to gavel you down, Ms. Houch. But that concludes our,
Madam Chair, I'd like you to ask unanimous consent to enter something into record.
so ordered.
Madam, I'd like to enter into the Oglala Sioux Tribe, the Office of the President, and a memorandum submitted to Secretary Burgum, Nome, and other members regarding the illegal detention of Oglala Sioux Lakota tribal members by the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. I spoke to the president the day after, and they still had not been able to get their tribal members released. and they had 1 out of the 4 had been released by the time I was able to speak to him. He described 9 different tribes who were gathered in Minnesota dealing with getting their protections for their tribal members. So I'd like to enter that into the record, Madam Chair.
Unanimous consent. That is it. So thank you both for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Madam Ranking Member. And we will bring up our first witness panel. Mr. Hoyer, Mr. Veazey, Mr. Gomez, Mr. Horsford, Ms. Tenney, and Mr. Keating. Mr. Keating. I'm sorry, I'm not. My voice is starting to go. Where are we?
We're waiting on Mr. Horsford.
Is Mr. Horsford here? Or close by? Ms. Sparts, if you'd like to, we'll come back. We're trying to keep them in groups of 6, but some of them ran off. So, Mr. Hoyer, please. And we ask that you summarize your testimony in 5 minutes. Oh, Mr. Veazey was, okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. Mr. Hoyer, please.
Am I on? Yeah, now I'm on. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm here in support of the Keating-Hoyer Meeks amendment. It ought not to be, in my view.
Excuse me just a minute, Mr. Hoyer. It's really hard to hear in here right now, so if everybody, I am waiting for Mr. Hoyer's testimony and excited to hear it.
With
so.
bated breath, I know.
So, please, Mr. Hoyer.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and Ranking Member McGovern, and distinguished members of the committee. I started to say this ought not to be a controversial amendment. Mr. McGovern made the point that we ought to have amendments. We ought to have open debate. Mr. Roy made the same comment. Happily, I think this amendment ought not to be too controversial. I may be wrong on that, but I thank you all for coming, and I thank Mr. Keating for his leadership on this, which bars any fund in this bill from being used for the invasion of a NATO member country. Frankly, Madam Chair, I think that proposition has broad support in the Congress of the United States. It is sad that we need an amendment to assure that doesn't happen. Last weekend, I laid a wreath at the monument dedicated to young men and women who fought and died to defend liberty and democracy. Engraved on that memorial are the names of familiar theaters of war: Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan, and others. Madam Chair, that memorial is not in Washington, D.C. It is in Copenhagen, Denmark. Danes have fought side by side with Americans around the world. Indeed, Denmark lost more troops per capita in Afghanistan than we did. Denmark has been a model ally. This administration's threat to annex Greenland and an autonomous Danish territory makes our nation less secure by alienating our allies and emboldening our adversaries, all for no strategic gain whatsoever. We presently do whatever we deem necessary in Greenland. Whatever we want to do, we can do in Greenland. Our 1951 bilateral agreement with Denmark grants us virtually complete latitude to do whatever we need, whenever we need, and wherever we need on the island to counter our adversaries. President Trump has articulated a single national security, hasn't articulated a single national security or economic objective that America has in Greenland that we cannot already achieve through our current agreement. Taking Greenland is as unpopular as it is unnecessary. This amendment would be supported by at least 75% of the American people and a majority of the Republicans who are polled. They oppose annexing Greenland. They are wary for good reason. America has nothing to gain from taking Greenland, but we stand to lose more than anyone else. The ensuing turmoil would severely weaken NATO. NATO has overwhelming support. The thought that America would even consider taking military action this way fills our allies with dread and our adversaries with glee. That's not good for America. Putin has made clear his intention to restore the old Soviet empire. Without NATO, there is nothing to stop it from venturing into the Baltic and beyond. President Trump's, I know everybody's using their phone, but I really do believe this is an important issue for America. And I believe it is nonpartisan. President Trump's comment in Davos today that he does not intend to use military force to seize Greenland was a welcome assurance. This amendment is consistent with the President's comments today. Madam Chair, we owe it to the vast majority of Americans who oppose annexing Greenland to give this amendment a vote on the House floor. Let the Congress speak. It will speak in a bipartisan fashion. Don't shut them out. We've talked about this process being essentially the Big Four. I will tell you, as a subcommittee ranking member, we had no meeting of the subcommittee on the conference. We owe this assurance to our allies who have never betrayed our trust. We owe it to the countless Americans, Danes, and others who lay down their lives to maintain a world order that does not allow for wars of conquest. If there is ever a time for Congress to exercise its constitutional power of the purse in America's foreign affairs, now is the time. All this amendment says, and Mr. Keating will be speaking to the specific, all it says is that we will not invade a NATO nation. Not one of you doesn't understand the angst that exists in NATO right now. And this would be coupled with the President's assurance today that there would not be an invasion. This will support that assertion and give greater confidence to our allies. And that confidence is critically important for our own security. I urge you, make an exception to what appears to be your rule of no democratic amendments. I was Majority Leader, Madam Chair. I offered a number of open rules when we considered appropriation bills, and we passed all 12 through the House of Representatives in my first term as Majority Leader by July 30th. All 12. Open amendments. At the end, we had so much time, and our friend Patrick McHenry became a good friend of mine, but he was a pain in the neck his first term, and he had 1 zillion amendments. So we had to have some rules cut off. The last 2 bills, we did that. We had open rules. Why? We gave people. And then, Madam Chair, when we had a rule, Mr. Boehner, who was your leader at that point in time, and I talked. And I said, John, I will give you 10 amendments. Whatever amendments you choose to make in order, we'll do that. He turned down that offer because I don't think he wanted to make that choice, Madam Chair. But the point I'm making is this is the representative body of the people. Please let them speak on this issue. Win, lose, or draw. Let them speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. My great respect for you. You know that. So thank you very much. I've let you go way over. Mr. Vesey, you are recognized.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. I'm rising today to speak in support of an amendment that I think shouldn't be controversial or partisan, or shouldn't be difficult for this committee to confront. I know that many people on this panel, including on the Republican side, have been on the trip to Selma, Alabama, and the annual pilgrimage that takes place. And one of the things that I always hear people say is that if you show me that type of racism, because we disagree about racism in present day, but you'll always hear people say, now you show me that type of racism, Mark, and I'll stand with you. So I want to talk to you about that type of racism. The question for the committee today is simple. Will we protect and fund Nazism and Hitler sympathizers who operate on taxpayer dime, or will you cut the cancer from our country? James Roden, he's a taxpayer-funded attorney for ICE, and he has publicly said the same way how those people in Selma back in the 1960s, how those people in Birmingham back in the 1960s blatantly said things that we now that were normal back then, but we now found very offensive. He has said in his own words, "I am a fascist." Those aren't allegations, characterizations. Those are his words. Nearly 1 year ago, it was revealed that Mr. Roden has, since 2012, hidden behind an anonymous social media account used to promote white supremacist ideology, racist conspiracy theories, and explicit calls for violence. For more than a decade, while drawing a government paycheck, he used that account to spread the rhetoric that is violent, hateful, and fundamentally un-American. And let me be clear about what was said, because this committee deserves clarity and not euphemisms. Mr. Roden wrote, quote, again, very blatant, like in the 1960s, very blatant. He wrote, "America is a white nation founded by whites. Our country should favor us." Quote, "All blacks are foreign to my people." He referred to the 1964 Civil Rights Act that made it to where we could desegregate lunch counters and public spaces. Freedom of association hasn't existed in this country since 1964. I'm not a commie, I'm a fascist. Those statements are disgusting and they are dangerous. And regardless of if you are a Democrat or a Republican, they should be disqualifying for anyone entrusted with power in the United States government. James Roden is not a private citizen. He is an ICE attorney, someone who represents the United States in immigration court, where people's freedom, families, and futures are on the line. And I want to be clear about something because Ms. Fishback said something earlier about attacking all ICE agents. I'm not attacking any ICE agents. I'm pointing out one person who has said those terrible things that I hope no one in here thinks is okay or would call that politically correct or anything like that. Those were awful things that he said. If Congress does nothing, if the committee does nothing, then we're sending the message that this type of behavior is tolerable, that accountability is optional, and that white supremacy can continue to be subsidized with taxpayer dollars. And I just think that cannot stand. And so the amendment before you is simple and it's narrow. It sends a clear message that we are not going to fund this man's salary and that Congress will not fund hate. We can stand by Nazi sympathizers and Hitler supporters, or we can do the right thing and honor the sacrifices of the men and women who died to stop the hateful spread of Nazism. If he wants to go be an attorney for a Stormfront, or if he wants to go be an attorney for some crazy group like that, then he ought to be able to go practice law and do that. He has a law license, but he shouldn't be a lawyer for the federal government and be paid with taxpayer dollars. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Veazey. Mr. Gomez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I never thought I would live in a United States of America where we have two simultaneous things going on. One, we have a ICE and CBP and federal agents that are attacking U.S. citizens throughout the country. On the other hand, we also have a president who is threatening to take over Greenland. Let me kind of put it in starker terms. Our allies, the Europeans that fought shoulder to shoulder with us during World War II, are more scared of being invaded or having their country taken over, or portion of their country taken over, by the United States of America. That's where we're at. So frightened that they had to send troops to Greenland. So I have two amendments to deal with these two, I would say, historic and embarrassing situations. One, we need is to take that $175 billion slush fund that was put into the One Big Beautiful Bill and redirect it to the issue that most Americans are complaining about, affordability, specifically housing affordability. That $175 billion has no strings attached, it has no guardrails, and it's only being used to turn ICE, CBP into Trump's national police force. That can be sent anywhere, wherever he wants, whenever he wants, wherever he wants. They're going door to door, asking people if they're citizens. Not based on probable cause, they're just going door to door to achieve that 3,000 person quota that Stephen Miller set up. They've been so reckless that they're pulling people over that are police officers. Why? Because under Trump's administration, under Trump's ICE and CBP, if you're brown, if you're Latino, you have an accent or the job you do, you're guilty until proven innocent. It's too dangerous to leave in place. We need to take that money and direct it to this housing crisis, to build starter homes for families that want to buy that first home to get ahead in the United States, the down payment assistance that will help working people get ahead, tax incentives convert underutilized office and commercial real estate to housing with a set aside for affordable units. We need to really invest in the one issue that Americans continue talking about, which is affordability. Then my other amendment would prohibit the use of any federal funds to invade, acquire, coerce the Greenland or the Danish government to give over Greenland to the United States, because that would wreck an alliance that has maintained the peace and security across the globe. It will wreck our intelligence sharing that we do with the Europeans that have been crucial into our ability to fight terrorism, to keep Americans safe. I sit on the House Intelligence Committee. I can tell you that our relationships with the European are crucial and they must be maintained. But this is where we're at. We live in a time where they are more concerned about us than the Russians. Let that sink in. And I know people are saying that Trump came up with some magic deal. Well, with a lot of those deals, they kind of dissipate the minute you start talking about them or asking them questions. So this is a common sense amendment. It doesn't mean that we can't negotiate a deal to put more bases on Greenland. It means that we're not going to threaten our ally, one of our closest allies, with invasion or coercion or manipulation that we want to take over Greenland. Because if it does, it's going to impact every single American, from their security to their economic prosperity. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. I don't know who came in first, Ms. Tenney or Mr. Keating. I saw Mr. Keating here for a long time.
He's in with it. They have the same amendment.
Okay. Okay. I'll recognize Mr. Keating.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Ranking Member. My grandparents came here from Europe. They founded the local church. They got a house and they rented and scrapped up enough money to buy it. And although people on the street tried to buy it from under them because of their religion, they persevered, had support in the community, and they loved this country. They loved the United States. At World War II, in the window of that house, there were 5 blue stars, which I think everyone knows what that means. There were 5 serving at the same time, from the islands in the South Pacific, anti-aircraft, to Europe, to North Africa, all around the globe, spread out. In fact, one of my uncles sent a package for his birthday to his brother, and it came back marked deceased, and that's the way he found out that his brother was killed in action while wounded, saving another person's life under his command and going out to get someone else when he was machine gunned in half. 400,000 Americans were killed, over 400,000 in World War II. Other families that sacrificed so much. But one of the greatest things that sacrifice for their families and their descendants like myself meant was the legacy they left of peace and prosperity highlighted by the NATO agreement in 1949. The greatest period of peace and prosperity our country has ever seen. It's a great comfort to families who've lost people to know that that meant so much. You know, it meant a lot to all of us after 9/11. I knew Father Michael Judge, the first recorded fatality in New York. He was chaplain to the New York Fire Department, and he died rushing into the building in his duty as a chaplain. And what happened was, as a result, Article 5, for the only time, was invoked. And it was invoked because the U.S. was attacked. And all our allies in the NATO came to our assistance. Mr. Scott and I, one of our earlier trips, traveled through the whole region, and we saw all the NATO troops supporting the U.S. We saw Danes there, who were the highest pro rata casualties of any of the people. So when we had this issue come before us that would fragment and maybe destroy NATO, I dealt with our European allies. I sat down with all of them, and they wanted to take a non-confrontational approach. And as before this, from the time this hearing started, I'm going to share with you at the end, it's going to be easier to support this bill at the end of this hearing, knowing what happened, than it is before. But it caused great scarring. People who went to Europe know this. The people coming back from Davos know this. And even though there's events that have transpired to lessen the controversy, the fact that this took place will leave an indelible scar, I think, that can be really healed by great measure by the act of Congress. This is our opportunity to move forward as a Congress. This is a bipartisan amendment of 30 sponsors. It mirrors a bill that almost has 70 sponsors, bipartisan sponsors before, to try and just make the statement that we are together, NATO, countries that are not going to be fragmented by any threats against each other. Mr. Norman talked about the things that he liked, you know, aid to Israel, aid to our allies. But we better have some allies to give aid to. And we have a coalition that the Chinese and the Russians do not have. And that is the envy of the world and gives us the most strategic advantage we can. So let me get quickly to the news that occurred since the beginning of this hearing, if I could share with you. The president has announced he's dropping the tariffs. The president's announced he's in discussions right now to deal with this controversy. And that's great. He announced earlier he wouldn't take military action. But the fact that this occurred and the scars that it could leave are what's important. We have a chance as a Congress in a bipartisan way to do something so significant, to make sure that there's no doubt in the future that we stand together, and to really give a legacy and meaning to families like mine and so many others who've lost someone to get us to this point. If we can't agree with this on a bipartisan basis, I don't know what we can. You know, those people I worked with in Europe, they didn't want Denmark mentioned. They didn't want targets. And when I came up with the idea of working with Mr. Hoyer, Mr. Meeks, Mr. Bacon, all together, putting the idea, this is about NATO. This is an amendment that doesn't tear us apart in controversy, but brings us together. This is a great opportunity for Congress. I hope we take advantage of it. I really hope you rule it in order. It's less controversial now than it was at the beginning of this hearing. And that makes it that much easier to go forward with this. This is really important. You know I don't come here a lot. And you'd be grateful for that, I suppose. But I hope you give this some serious consideration, because it's an unusual opportunity as a Congress to have our voice heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keating. Ms. Denny, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairwoman Fox, and thank you to everyone here on the Rules Committee. I just want to take this opportunity to testify about an amendment that we'd like to have added to the text of the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2026, and that is the Susan Muffley Act. It's HR 7148,
And as many of you know, more than 20,000 Delphi employees, salaried employees, lost the full value of their retirement benefits in the aftermath of the General Motors fallout. As part of the 2009 bankruptcy agreement, the Delphi Corporation, a subsidiary of GM, surrendered its pension and benefit obligations to the Pension and Benefit Guaranty Corporation. The Obama administration then worked behind closed doors with union leaders to guarantee union workers full pension and health care benefits while slashing the pensions and health care promised to the 20,000 non-unionized salaried staff. After a decade of exhausting every avenue in the judicial system, the Delphi salaried retirees are relying on Congress to restore their pensions, their contributory health care and pension plans, I might add. President Trump has fully supported restoring the Delphi salaried pensions, their earned benefits, and it is beyond time for Congress to right this egregious injustice. To do so, I, alongside Congresswoman Spartz, Congressman Turner, introduced the Susan Muffley Act once again to fully restore the Delphi salaried retirees' earned benefits that they are owed. I want to take a moment just to tell the full story of one of my constituents, Judy Folks, who is still in my district. Judy's husband, Denny, worked for Delhi for over 35 years. He contributed to his pension and his health care benefits. He did what we wanted him to do. He worked every day and contributed those benefits. However, one night, a FedEx package was thrown on Judy and Denny's front steps, and they were shocked to find out that his pension and health care benefits that he contributed to were gone, completely eliminated. Denny was already struggling with illnesses at the time, but his news sent him into depression. He became suicidal and even remarked to Judy that the only way he could be a good provider to her is to die by April 1st before their coverage expired. It financially crippled Judy and Denny. They had to make their own laundry soap, buy Christmas presents at garage sales, and his family was stuck trying to find ways to afford his medical bills. They could barely make ends meet. General Motors and the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation had no issue fully funding the unionized co-workers' pensions, but because Denny was a salaried non-union employee, his benefits were slashed. This not only defines injustice, it defines a lack of equality and justice under law. I'm honored to support the Susan Muffley Act and to be a co-lead on this legislation. My colleague, Victoria Spartz, also has legislation that will right this wrong to the Delphi employees. The amendment of this text, if added, of this important bill in the minibus, has to pay for that the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, both the majority and minority have signed off on. With this pay for, the amendment saves the federal government over $1 billion over 10 years. So there's no fiscal cost, there's actually savings. This is a good fiscally sound bill. I support the underlying consolidation appropriations, of course, and the package, including many items riding on this package, such as extending AGOA and Haiti Hope and Help Act, the PBM reforms. However, there is no reason that the Susan Muffley Act, a revenue neutral, actually revenue benefiting legislation, should not be included in this package. I want to also highlight that that 6 Rules Committee members have already publicly demonstrated their support for this bill. Representatives Scott, McGovern, Scanlon, Neguse, Ledger-Fernandez all voted for this bill in July of 2022 when it passed the full House of Representatives. Additionally, Representatives Langworthy and Scott are both co-sponsors of this bill. I also think it's worth noting that both Chairman Cole and Ranking Member DeLauro of the Appropriations Committee have also voted for and supported this bill. It's disappointing that the Susan Muffley Act continues to await meaningful progress in Congress year after year. This issue is so urgent. This wrong is so egregious. We are committed to helping these salaried retirees get their benefits once and for all. Reversing this injustice would be life-saving for so many of my constituents and all the Delphi salaried retirees across the country whose pensions, and I might add, I continue to say contributory pensions, they literally lost their own money at the hands of the federal government, and these were stripped away by them. I just want to again thank Ranking Member, thank all the sorry about that. I want to thank the Rules Committee for allowing me to talk out of this, in order on this, and to add potentially this amendment. This has been 16 years that the Delphi employees have been trying to right this travesty and been denied fairness and justice. Before I yield back, I'd just like to again thank Representatives Turner and Spartz for co-leading this effort and for introducing the Susan Muffley Act once again. I also want to say special thanks to Rick Straczynski and all of the advocates from the Delphi Salaried Retirees Association for their hard work and their tenacity and their unwavering hope for this to happen. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Denny. Ms. Spartz, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ranking Member Harris, and thank you, Congresswoman Cheney and Representative Turner to really fighting for people. Also, as many other representatives in this House, I mean, we probably can debate a lot of foreign issues and illegal immigration here, don't agree, but it seems like this is a bipartisan issue. And, you know, and unfortunately, Senate failed us again. We, unfortunately, you know, they always can figure out how they can benefit oligarchs in Washington, D.C., but if we do something for working class people, we cannot really have justice, serve justice, and fix the wrong. And we talk about about a lot of regular order. I'm not sure if 75% of spending we never looked at, and some of the agency were not authorized for decades. That's going to be called regular order, and there are some things in this legislation which, like PBM reforms, which I agree with, and they may be not exactly also in line with this, but we know that we need to get it done, and I push personally for that because we need to make sure that we get something done, not just messaging bill. So I just hope that this committee can consider, because a lot of members here supported this legislation in the House, to put in something that the Senate is going to be putting on the spot and see, are they really supporting working class people that were run by government? If you remember the history, this plan, what happened, when, during President Obama, when, the industries fail, our GM industry and the automotive industry for a variety of wrong reasons that will happen on our, finance markets, which government intervention caused in a lot of ways. But anyway, during that bailout, unfortunately, this was salaried employees, they were forced to dissolve the plan, and GM wasn't forced to take that plan, was 100% funded. So the plan was valued in 2008 and 9, which is, as you know, if you look at S&P 500, it probably was like, 700? Now it's 7,000, right? So it's 10 times more the value. So these assets were put in Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation. They all recovered. There is more than enough money to restore this benefit. So these people were run and cut because there was a lot of politics. My state, what was part of this politics, our pension plan got hurt. We actually lost lawsuit, but government now in Indiana taxpayers are paying for that. But this is a private individuals that had fully funded plan, got tangled in politics, and pretty much was screwed for a reason because we had the government politics. A lot of people committed suicides. A lot of people's lives were destroyed. So this institution is almost 20 years we talk about that and can never do it right. It doesn't cost taxpayers. We're using their money. The market recovered. We have this asset. There is no reason why this institution shouldn't do something for working class people. They probably don't have very expensive lobbies here like everyone else. Don't have PACs that's bombarding everyone here. But this is real lives. And I think these parties need to say, are we doing something for real Americans that's struggling with healthcare costs, with our inflation and a lot of reckless spending caused by this institution, totally by this institution. We can blame presidents, but we're in charge of the finances of this country, and we failed the American people. Maybe at least we can do a little bit to get actually what we took from them. We actually took this money from them, and we asking just restore the benefits that they funded. They put money in these accounts. It's not asking to take taxpayers' money. We have several types of legislation, how to deal with it. The Senate has, and Representative Cheney has a version that Senate seems like agreeing by partisan basis. We have Senator Cassidy and Bernie Sanders agree on that. Okay, Senator Schumer used to support that. I mean, a lot of people on both sides seems like support, but it seems like Senate never want to have it and must pass legislation. And the House passed it before. Can the House do something for we the people as a people house and can put something into the Senate, and let's see what senators are going to do. A lot of them forgot where the states are located. I believe it was 17th Amendment. Well, let's see if they put their money where mouth is. I think it's a bipartisan issue. I think this is an issue we should support on a bipartisan basis and do something for Main Street, not just constantly cater to Wall Street, which both parties do in a very good way, destroying the fiscal situation of our country. So I urge my colleagues to be open-minded. I urge my colleagues to put this amendment, and if some people don't like it, that's fine, but I think most people on both sides of the aisle should support it, and these people deserve justice, not messaging's bill for a decade. We cannot continue doing it. We have some respect for actually real people's life and do something for we the people, not just constantly worry about elections and PACs. So I would urge your support. I hope you consider to taking this amendment and put it on the floor, and let Senate decide how they're going to be voting on that, but we need to figure out some must-pass legislation to actually help these people and bring justice. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Spartz. At 2 minutes after, they call votes, and the message was the first vote's going to close after 20 minutes. So the committee will stand in recess until immediately after the last vote on the floor. There'll be 3 votes. Oh, you want to do questions? If you'll wait a second. Okay. All right. We can do questions. Mr. McGovern, I'll recognize you first.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I support all your amendments. Standing Ms. Spartz, I supported this initiative in the past. I'll support it again. But to Mr. Hoyer and Mr. Keating, Mr. Gomez, on the Greenland stuff, I'm reading, I think maybe the president's trying to back down a little bit because the stock market went south with all this talk about invading Greenland. But I mean, his exact words were, "We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force, where we would frankly be unstoppable. But I won't do that." This should be easier to do right now that he has said that he seems like he's backing down. But to be honest with you, every day with this White House is unpredictable, and consistency is not one of their strengths. They're all over the place. But I saw a news story from Greenland where people were saying, "Well, I don't want to be annexed by the United States. I've got free health care. I've got free child care. I don't want to be you." But then I saw people wearing MAGA hats, and the reporter asked this one guy, "Are you supporting Donald Trump, and he says, no, MAGA stands for Make America Go Away. And the fact that that's what people who should be our allies are saying about us in reaction to the threats and really the derogatory, offensive comments about the people who live there should all give us pause. And I think really Congress has an opportunity right now to demonstrate to the people of Greenland, to the people of Denmark, that we have a different approach here, that we think differently. We respect their autonomy. We respect our alliance. We respect NATO. And the fact is that right now there is nothing in this bill that will prevent the president from using American taxpayer dollars to do a military action if he chose to do so. And so we have an opportunity here to do something. I think that, again, we could tell him we're reinforcing his change. But boy, I think it would help us in terms of our standing, not only in Europe, but around the world. So, and Mr. VC, I support you as well. I mean, we all talk the talk around here. Oh yeah, no, we're against racism, we're against bigotry, we're against hate. And then you get people that are being paid with taxpayer money who have publicly said things that go beyond offensive, and we tolerate it. Let's have a zero tolerance when it comes to people who espouse those ideas. But I thank you all for being here, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The president's not going to invade Greenland. I promise you that. I am happy that he made the statements today that's not going to happen. And but I want to reiterate what Ms. Tenney and Ms. Sparks have been here to discuss. I know some of my best friends' parents worked at the AC Delco factory in Georgia, and they lost everything. The people who were in the unions were taken care of, but if you were not in the union, you lost everything. This is just an issue of right and wrong, and it needs to be fixed. And I appreciate the fact that the two of you have been willing to continue to fight to try to fix what is a very serious wrong for hundreds of blue-collar Americans. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon.
We are in a position now where the president has said he's not going to invade. Whether it's because of concern about the instability of NATO or the instability of the markets or some other reason he's come to that conclusion. I agree with him. I'm glad he made the statement. I think it helps. And I'll tell you, Madam Chair and Mr. Scott, Austin and I have talked about this. If we want to reestablish stability and confidence, what this amendment does is says both the executive and the legislative branches have said that we're not going to invade a NATO nation, not Denmark or Greenland. We don't mention those. And I think what that does is gets us what is going to be a significantly difficult thing to do, and that is to reestablish the trust and confidence of the NATO nations, which is so critical to our security and theirs.
The gentleman, you have just a second.
Sure.
And one of the issues here, though, and that I think President Trump has been very right about, I mean, countries like Canada are putting in less than 1.5% of their GDP. Canada was going to buy close to 100 F-35s and only purchased 20. So, I mean, I understand that people who don't like President Trump think that his disruptive style has been a problem for NATO.
I know we're on the clock here and we got to get through everyone
Okay,
before the vote,
fair
so I
enough.
would just
But I'm
reclaim my
saying
time, but
the NATO countries need to put in.
I would just
their percentage of
wrap it up
GDP.
with the fact that this is why we need to have these debates. And, the assurance that the president isn't going to do it would mean a lot more if we had the assurance of Congress's backing. So, Mr. Hoyer, anything final?
I just want, you're absolutely right. The president was absolutely right. Those countries that at 1%, 1.5%, when the 2% requirement. In his first term, he came through the 2%. Denmark is at 3.3 going to 3.6 or 7 and going to get to 5. Now they get to 5. So that was a positive effort. But in the aftermath of what we have done in terms of the expression of the possibility of armed conflict with a NATO nation, the reestablishment of trust, I think, is a critically important issue, which is why I think this does that. The president said it, we say it, going to make a difference.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Negus? Thank you. Ms. Leisure-Fernandez?
I think we've run out of time, but I do support that we should not be funding people who act in such a racist manner. And I also think that when Trump says that the only thing that can stop him with regards to Greenland is his own morality, it is Congress's obligation to act and to vote, because he hasn't really shown a lot of morality. And, you know, he's being called a taco again on this, right? Trump always chickens out or caves, whatever. We cannot rely on him because he switches his mind every 6 hours or so. So Congress, under the Constitution, has the authority. And with that, Madam Chair, I know people want to talk, but I think we've run out of time. Is that right? Because Representative Gomez, can you do it in 30 seconds?
Yep. I was speaking to one of my Republican colleagues on Intel, and he told me at the beginning of the year, don't take Trump literally, but take him seriously. And that's what I'm afraid of. With that,
I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ledger Fernandez. Now, the committee stands in recess until immediately after the last vote. And this panel is dismissed. Committee will come to order. The next people on my list are Ms. Stansberry, Mr. Larson, Ms. Titus, Mr. Moskowitz, Mr. Smucker, Mr. Quigley. Not here. Okay, we're going to go to Ms. Julie Johnson. You can sit there if you want. Yeah. We will put your whole comments into the record, but we ask you to keep your spoken comments to 5 minutes or less. Ms. Stansberry, you're recognized.
Madam Chair, Ranking Member, I'm grateful to be here once again in front of the Rules Committee and to testify on the funding package that we have before us and that we will be voting on the floor this week. Now, I want to start out by addressing the elephant in the room, which is that while we are sitting here in the House of Representatives today, the United States President is overseas using his international platform to continue to threaten our allies and undermine NATO, to spread lies about our election, and to threaten his political opponents on the international stage, and to embarrass the United States in front of the world. And meanwhile, his administration is unleashing thousands of armed, untrained agents into American cities where they are terrorizing our communities, they are violating the civil and human rights of Americans, and dragging people from their homes and cars. And where, in Minneapolis, as we all know, an ICE agent not only shot and killed Renee Nicole Good 2 weeks ago, but also shot a gentleman named Julio Cesar Sosa Celis last week. And not only has this administration refused to take accountability for these actions, they have thrown fuel onto the fires. The president himself, the vice president, Secretary Noem, Stephen Miller, and others in the administration have actively encouraged and incited this violence, incited the lawlessness, incited the cruelty, and claimed that they would provide total immunity for these acts. Well, the buck stops here. That's why today I am offering an amendment to defund ICE in this bill by stripping $10 billion out of the DHS budget and to take away funding. Because we cannot, in good conscience, continue to sit here and allow this rogue and out-of-control agency to operate without accountability and wreak violence in our streets, while unfortunately our colleagues across the aisle are refusing to exercise the most basic constitutional oversight authority to hold them accountable and to rein in the illegal and unjust acts that are happening in American cities right now. Secondly, while we sit here, the president is continuing to double down on his desire to take land in Greenland in front of our European and NATO allies. Now, I know that there's late breaking news and reports of some sort of framework agreement coming together because our allies had to take the action of actually threatening the bond markets to basically get the president to stop making threats against our most important military alliance. And I know that at least some of you in this room know that that is wrong. In fact, I think I heard that a moment ago. You also know it's stupid and it's crazy, not only because it violates the sovereignty of a foreign country, but because it's illegal, unconstitutional, and because it would blow up our most important military alliance on planet Earth since World War II. Now, our allies have been clear And an unauthorized invasion of Greenland would not only trigger the common defense of our allies, which is why they have sent troops there and taken this economic action, but we have to be clear that this is also just insane. Like, this is literally insane. And I see none of you are paying attention. You're just on your phones. And so, it's just like how the American people are asking us, why are we not reining in this madman? And so that's why I'm here today to reintroduce my War Powers Amendment to rein in this president by directing the removal of any U.S. troops from being used in hostilities against any sovereign nation in the Western Hemisphere. Because Greenland today, Colombia tomorrow, Cuba the next day, who the hell knows what this president is going to do? And if we do not assert our constitutional authority, he is going to continue to do things like using the unlawful military presence in Venezuela to steal Venezuelan oil and then break the constitutional laws around appropriations by taking that money and putting it in offshore bank accounts in Qatar. Why are we not doing oversight over that? Why are you not actually holding this president accountable? I believe that you all know we are a co-equal branch of government, and so it's time to do our jobs. Finally, I know that many of you spoke up about this last week. The White House announced they would cut $2 billion in funding for behavioral health and substance abuse programs. And in front of us, we have a bill for healthcare for this country. And so if you are serious about saving lives, my other two amendments would fund mental health and addiction recovery programs and rural clinics across the United States. In fact, one of my amendments would take that $10 billion that we would cut and put it towards SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Program, to fund direct community-based programs for mental health, opioid treatment, drug prevention, and peer support. And that would more than double those programs. Imagine the lives that could be saved. My other amendment would add $6 billion to community health funding, because that, Madam Chair, is America first. So I urge you to adopt my amendments. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mr. Larson, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Ranking Member McGovern. It's been a pleasure to sit here and observe the committee. It's not often, I'm sure, that you get a lot of praise here, but as a student of the institution, I admire the work on both sides of the aisle. It's educational, and part of my thrust here is to educate this morning with my amendments, and I have three as they relate to Social Security and as they relate to what's happening right in front of our very eyes, which came before us in great clarity last Friday when the Justice Department revealed and the administration admitted to that those workers had actually been giving documents to agencies, private information of the citizens of the United States to agencies with respect to voting allegations. Well, we had been warning for some time that this is what would happen when you have people that are not vetted, that have not gone through any process, starting with Elon Musk, but then with these 24-year-olds that have access to 300 million plus Americans' personal data and information, and have been allowed, initially blocked by the lower courts, but then the Supreme Court back in June said, no, they could continue to go forward with what they're doing until the case is finished. Seems a little backwards to me, but the case is still ongoing. But last Friday, they indicated that the administration, who said, oh, no one will touch those documents, no one will have access to it, in this document indicated that they had directly given information. I think those individuals should be prosecuted to the ultimate extent, Madam Chair. But beyond that as well, we also had the whistleblower who came forward in July. Now, this is separate from these other allegations that have taken place. And that whistleblower has indicated that they have taken all the data from Social Security and put it in an insecure cloud. Some say they call it the flare cloud. Whatever it's called, it's insecure. We have been calling for investigations, and that's what this legislation does. Restoring employees, number one, who've been laid off, making sure that the phone service is back intact, and that people who are eligible for Social Security get the benefits that they need, and then also making sure that there's a full investigation by the Congress across the board, from Ways and Means that has cognizance over Social Security to Judiciary, which also has a role to play here, as well as House administration. There is a real need out here. What's happening, none of you up here would subscribe to any of your constituents' data being exposed and taken out of Social Security. For what purposes? And to what use is this data going? In the court documents, they said in one case it's for political use. The real question is, what other use behind this as well? And why is it that unvetted, undocumented people have access to all of our constituents' personal data and are taking them and placing them in an insecure cloud? I hope that you will pass these amendments that will provide for the restriction and continue what used to be an enforcement. Even Donald Trump's own directly appointed person in January 20th said, I will resign before I will allow Doge individuals to have access to people's personal data. She ended up being forced to resign, and she did. She ought to get a Congressional Medal of Honor for standing up for what's right. And so should Congress stand up for what's right for each and every one of our constituents whose data has been exposed. There needs to be a thorough cross-committee investigation, and I'm calling upon the Rules Committee to adopt my legislation that would make that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Ms. Titus, you're recognized.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman, ranking members. Nice to see you. You left our hall, but now I found you somewhere else, so thank you. I'm here this afternoon just to advocate for an amendment that I introduced as a bill last July and has been gaining bipartisan support ever since. It's got about 25 members from both sides of the aisle. It's to restore the loss deduction for gaming to 100%. Just a straightforward fix. It's 3 words to a problem that never should have been created in the first place. For decades, our tax code allowed you to deduct 100% of any gaming losses from your winnings. It was a common sense policy. It was fair. It recognized reality. People should only pay tax on money that they actually earn, not on phantom money, not on ghost money. But when the big, beautiful bill went to the Senate, a provision was added kind of in dark of night that altered this and changed it to 90%. You could only deduct 90%, not 100%. Seems like a small number, but it had really great real-world consequences. Under the new limit, if a person wins $100,000 and loses $100,000 in the same year, that net is 0. But under the new provision, the person would still be taxed on 10% of income that they never actually earned because you can only deduct 90% of losses. Now, that just doesn't seem fair. You're having to pay taxes on money that just doesn't exist. And this is going to hurt professional gamblers as well as just people who bet on football games on the weekend. Now, beyond being unfair, it's going to push people to gamble offshore or in unregulated markets. Consumer protections are non-existent there. Transparency is weaker. This is the opposite of what responsible gaming should encourage. Now, as I said, this was kind of snuck in. If you ask some people over on the Senate side, well, they say, oh, I didn't even know that was in there. Oh, I don't even know what that means. Where did that come from? Well, here's a chance to fix it. If you restore that longstanding 100% deduction, you'll simply return to the law the way it was before, the way it was understood, the way it was practiced for many years. And you don't have to rewrite anything else. You can just change that 90 back to 100. It's a very simple fix. And like I said, it's got bipartisan and bicameral support. It reflects consensus across the spectrum and among members of the Congress where gaming exists in their district. Only 2 states don't have gaming anymore. So this is not a Las Vegas problem. This is a widespread issue. If you think about gaming as Las Vegas or Atlantic City or on a few Indian reservations, you're mistaken because it's now present in 48 states and the District of Columbia. Also, the gaming industry that is regulated supports 1.8 million jobs, $104 billion in wages and salaries, and $53 billion in tax revenue for state and local government. A lot of that will be lost if people go offshore. Millions of Americans occasionally or regularly gamble. Some of you probably bet on that football game that happened just yesterday or so. So it's a kind of a commonly accepted thing. Now, we've seen some constructive engagement from regulators, from industry leaders, and from constituents. When I put out a word that I was going to try to fix this, I got over 1 million likes on Twitter. Now, 1 million may not be much if you're Swifty, but it's a lot for me. And so you can see how people are really concerned about this. Also, stakeholders, including the American Gaming Association, MGM, DraftKings, FanDuel, Caesars, Wynn, Nevada Resort Association, and the National Thoroughbred Racing Association have all signed on. The co-chair of the Gaming Caucus, the Republican, is a co-sponsor. Chairman Cole of Appropriations is a co-sponsor. And interestingly, 2 members who have since introduced their own bill last week to do the same thing are co-sponsors of this bill. So it's not a niche concern. It's a fairness issue. Our tax system should be as fair as possible. You can make that happen with 3 little words. And you just shouldn't tax people on money that they don't earn. This is ghost money. It's not fair, and we can fix it. So I would urge you all to please make this amendment in order, and let's go back to the way things were and should be. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Titus. Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before the Rules Committee today to speak in support of my amendments to the Department of Homeland Security's funding bill. Since the very first day of the Trump administration, the Department of Homeland Security has enabled ICE and its agents to violate due process, disregard the law, and terrorize American citizens across this country. We have seen ICE agents detain and kill American citizens. We have seen them break into homes without warrants. We have seen them use excessive force when none was necessary. We have seen them deny people their constitutional rights and racially profile individuals during arrest. These are not isolated incidents, and they are blatant abuses of power. And no one, not President Trump, not Secretary Noem, not anyone at the Department of Homeland Security is stopping it. By refusing to rein in this conduct, the administration has effectively given ICE agents across the country a green light to continue terrorizing people with impunity. This is unacceptable, it is unlawful, and it must stop. And that is why I'm here today to offer 4 amendments to the DHS funding bill that restore accountability, uphold the Constitution, and protect the people we represent. My first amendment addresses qualified immunity. As it currently stands, qualified immunity shields federal law enforcement officers from civil liability. What we have seen over the past several months is ICE agents abusing that protection. they have violated the law, trampled constitutional rights, and abused their authority, then hide behind the immunity to avoid consequences. Qualified immunity was never meant to be a license to commit crimes upon the United States citizenry. ICE agents should not be shielded from accountability when they abuse their power. This amendment removes that protection and ensures that they can be held responsible when they violate the law. My second amendment requires ICE agents to read Miranda rights to anyone they arrest or detain. Under the Fifth Amendment, every person in this country has the right to remain silent and the right to an attorney. These are fundamental due process protections. They are what distinguish our democracy from authoritarian regimes. Every person, regardless of how, when, or why they are detained, has the right to know their rights. That includes encounters with ICE and all federal law enforcement. My third amendment guarantees a speedy due process hearing for anyone arrested or detained by ICE. When the government deprives someone of their liberty, it must tell them why. They must be able to confront the charges against them and defend themselves. We cannot allow ICE agents to detain people indefinitely, pulling them off the streets, holding them without explanation, and in some cases, sending them away to a completely different country without even a hearing. That is a clear violation of the Constitution and yet another example of unchecked power this administration has allowed to flourish. And lastly, my Fourth Amendment requires investigation into all ICE-involved shootings, including a pathway for accountability. It ensures that American citizens and individuals who are wrongfully detained can have their cases properly investigated. It holds ICE agents civilly liable when they wrongfully detain or assault someone, violate constitutional rights, and use excessive force without justification. This is especially critical in light of the murder of Renee Good in Minneapolis, where ICE agents were involved, and the Trump administration and DHS has refused to cooperate with local law enforcement to fully investigate what happened. At the same time, we continue to see ICE agents storm homes, detain people without warrants, and operate as if they are above the law. They are running rogue in communities across this country, spreading fear wherever they go. There is no accountability, and worse, Secretary Noem and President Trump are actively encouraging this behavior, while Republicans in this Congress have turned a blind eye and refused to step in. That leaves Congress with a responsibility to act. There must be consequences for abuse. There must be recourse for people whose rights are violated. There must be accountability for federal officers who believe the badge puts them above the Constitution. The American people will not tolerate a government that operates through fear, force, and lawlessness. We will not accept a Department of Homeland Security that behaves like a rogue authoritarian agency, terrorizing the very citizens it's meant to protect. No one should be arrested without a warrant. No one should be targeted because of the color of their skin. No one should be denied due process in this country. No one should be subjected to excessive force without accountability, ma'am. The abuses carried out by the Department of Homeland Security under President Trump and Secretary Noem must end. We have a constitutional duty to protect people we represent, and that is what these amendments do. And I strongly urge the Rules Committee to make these amendments in order. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Smucker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Ranking Member, members of the committee. Appreciate the work of this committee. I appreciate the opportunity to come before the committee, and I'm here to ask for your support for an amendment that would protect students' access to programs that prepare them for a great career or prepare them for the workforce. Specifically, the amendment reverses a small provision that had been included with regulation that was put out by the Department of Education during the previous administration. And by the way, this is an amendment that I think is non-controversial. It was adopted by a voice vote in the last session of Congress, attached to a bill that ended up not getting passed into law. So that's the reason that we need to do this again. Specifically, what I'm talking about is what we call clock hour programs. So these are licensure programs that exist in every state. And every state sets its own regulations and requirements for those programs. And the reason they're called clock hour is because they generally require that a student engages in a certain amount of hours of education and experience before they become licensed in that profession. So for instance, it would be professions like cosmetology, massage therapy, barbering, nursing, allied health, trucking, and others, generally where there's a state license. So each of the states set these requirements, minimum amount of hours in order for someone to be licensed. But some of these programs generally will provide more hours for the total education and experience. So for instance, I have several cosmetology schools in my area, and I talk to their students. They're well prepared. They like these programs. They have a great career as a result of it. But the teachers and administrators of the school believe that if they provided the education at only the minimum hours that the state, this is minimum hours, their students wouldn't be sufficiently prepared to serve in that role. And the federal government, of course, is interested in ensuring that the programs that we're providing federal assistance for are efficient. So what we've done in the past is we say that federal aid will go to these programs as long as the program doesn't include hours over 150% of the minimum requirement. So 150% of the minimum. This regulation I'm talking about that was put into place in the past administration reduced that requirement to 100%. So they said if the program exceeds the minimum hours set by the state, it will no longer be eligible for any federal aid. And so, again, I already mentioned the administrators believe that won't sufficiently prepare the student. So I'm asking that we go back to the 150% requirement and continue to allow aid to flow to these students who are being prepared. You know, we have millions of jobs not being filled. The last thing I think we want to do, we want to make sure individuals have access to these great jobs. The last thing we want to do is discourage that or prevent that from happening in any case. And so my amendment is very simple. It's just a sentence or two. It would just simply say that none of the funds made available may be used to implement, administer, or enforce this new rule that had been put in place. And so again, I appreciate your time here, and I hope appreciate you allowing my time here, and I hope for your consideration to have this amendment included in the bill. Thank you.
Mr. Quigley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, children traumatized in their homes, schools, and daycares, people targeted based on the color of their skin, U.S. citizens violently detained, families separated, and people killed by masked federal agents. This is the chaos we witnessed in the Trump administration. They have deployed undertrained, emboldened immigration enforcement agents who have terrorized communities from Chicago to Minneapolis. But through it all, the administration has excused this behavior and encouraged agents to go even further. All the while, they piled up more money into the agencies committing these atrocities. Since ICE and CBP began this reign of terror in my city, I've heard from thousands of my constituencies that they want some accountability. And you can understand that. I've been to shelters and food pantries where people are afraid to go, undocumented or citizens. I've been to businesses in Pilsen and Little Village. Their businesses are down 20 to 50% because people are just afraid to go out. In Wicker Park, the Chamber of Commerce met. They said that the combination of tariffs and the COVID rates have been worse for them than COVID to where they're going and whether they can sustain. Now, this administration claimed that they would go after the worst of the worst, but the facts in Chicago are different. According to records from Trump's own Justice Department, 97% of the people detained during Operation Midway Blitz had no criminal record. A federal judge has ruled that ICE violated a consent decree after they made arrests without warrants or probable cause. Before the horrified killing of Renee Nicole Good in Minneapolis, immigration enforcement officers shot Miramar Martinez and Silverio Villegas Gonzalez in Chicago. They killed Mr. Villegas Gonzalez. This has to stop. One of the things Congress can do to stop this is to turn off the spigot. No more money for the illegal operations. ICE has seen its budget triple under this administration. They have more than doubled the number of agents, offering them $50,000 bonuses and drawing away much-needed police officers. Chicago is 2,000 police officers short. And they see ads that say, you can quit your job, start collecting your pension, we'll give you a $50,000 bonus. We also have read of incredibly important law enforcement programs where those officers are being taken away to go after the people in the city of Chicago and across our country. So this is why I introduced an amendment to restrict DHS funding until ICE and CBP make drastic changes. The amendment will require them to stop illegal warrantless arrests, mandate active body cameras for ICE and CBP, restrict the use of facial coverings during immigration enforcement operations, restrict the use of chemical irritants like pepper spray, and prohibit raids in or near sensitive locations like schools, hospitals, and courthouses. Now, that used to be the custom under all previous administrations. You don't do that here, but those customs are gone. So the bottom line is Congress can't continue to fund ICE while they violate the rights of tens of thousands in Chicago, Minneapolis, and across the country. My amendment would bring that to an end, and I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. Mr. Norman, do you have any questions?
Mr. Quigley, just a question. When you were talking about the scared children, I guess insane, your words, action of President Trump, you had the same empathy for the unaccompanied minors that the Biden administration let in that are unaccounted for, that are child trafficked, sex trafficked?
You mean the ones I have sympathy for that were torn apart from their families under the first Trump administration? No people should be taken away from their families. I think the bottom line core to this is you deal with the atrocities and things that are happening in their home country.
My specific question is, the unaccompanied, with the Biden administration opening the borders, with the hundreds of thousands of children that are in who knows where, sex trafficked, whatever, is there sympathy for them?
Okay, I have sympathy for all who are suffering this. But let's remember, the Trump administration is taking away officers from other enforcement duties and investigations, including child trafficking. Well, we have problems in Chicago in terms of public safety and issues that deal with the safety of kids. But he's poaching police officers, asking them to come leave Chicago and go do this. So absolutely have those concerns. But I don't for a second think the administration has any sympathy for kids because they're cutting emergency housing grant programs now. So there's no room at the end. They're cutting SNAP benefits. So there's no food at the end. And they're cutting the healthcare benefits of doubling the cost of healthcare benefits. So if you get sick at the end, there's no place for those kids to go. So I don't think this administration is a damn about kids. They haven't done anything to show any concern. And please don't tell me that they care about kids who have been forced to leave their home countries, often by themselves, when he does nothing to help them there, when he cuts foreign aid, when he cuts programs that help dissidents in those countries address those issues. So respectfully, I don't want to hear how concerned this administration is about kids with the 5 years of their track record.
That is, that, you know, you're part of the group that are endangering the police officers, the ICE agents. You're part of the group, you got Trump derangement syndrome. It's sick what you're putting the ICE agents through. And, you know, the American people are seeing the front and center stage. Mr. Stansbury, you were talking about the...
Well, the same group that cares about ICE agents
I'd like to ask you,
that cut the benefits
the floor is not yours.
and won't honor those, and they'll pardon the kids.
You were making
They'll
comments.
pardon the insurrectionists. Yeah, they care about cops.
It's not his floor. He doesn't have the time. I do.
Well, I can respond to his
I
last
didn't ask you
comment,
a
which was an
question.
attack on me, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, I didn't ask him another
I
question.
just wanted to know, can I respond to his last statement? So I don't get to respond to that?
No,
Okay.
sir. No, sir.
I didn't ask for a response. I mean,
Well, I
your
assume you
response-
didn't
your
want to, 'cause you lose the
Your
argument.
response told all. Your comment about, you know, President Trump and what he's doing with our allies, in your mind, with I assume Venezuela, you were opposed to that too, to put Maduro in jail. Are you against that?
Mr. Norman, the Constitution is opposed to that. The United States Constitution says that we cannot engage in a foreign war without the permission of Congress. And so I am opposed to the use
Okay.
of the
What about taking out
military.
Soleimani
I
in first?
am opposed to a president using war powers that he does not have to invade a foreign country to steal their oil.
What about taking Soleimani out in 2016?
Sir, I answered your question.
Pardon me?
I answered your question.
So it was a war to take a criminal that was killing Americans out in Soleimani. What about the cash money that Obama administration paid Iran? Was that the right thing to do rather than what President Trump did to eliminate the country of Iran who's threatening America? Was that right to pay? Which do you side with more? Paying the cash money at midnight? Or do you side with President Trump on taking out Iran?
Mr. Norman, can I ask you, do you believe it is legal for the president of the United States to steal a foreign country's oil and put it in a foreign bank account without
take your premise.
congressional appropriation?
You're part of the Trump derangement syndrome again. The majority of the people that put him in office agree with what this man is doing. And so
Mr.
it's just
Norman,
a
the American
constant.
people
Let
in
me
my
just
district
finish.
put me in office.
It's not your
and-
time. It's not your
But I
time.
don't have to sit here and be personally insulted by you, sir.
And your comments are insulting. Your
Okay.
comments against the
Yeah,
ICE
well,
agents are insulting.
we can have a difference of opinion.
No, you're
and,
putting them in
and
danger.
have
You're an
polite-
elected official.
And have polite discourse. I am not going to
I'm
personally
polite.
insult you, but I'm not going to sit here and allow you to personally insult me either.
Look, what you're saying is an insult to every ICE agent that's trying to do his job to take criminals off. We just have a disagreement, but it's spreading beyond that now with with what your side is saying. It really is.
There are
It's
no
not even-
sides. The only side is the American people in this country,
which
sir.
you're against. I yield back.
Madam Chair, I have an appointment. May I be dismissed? May I be dismissed from the panel for an appointment? Okay.
Oh, my God. Anyway, Mr. Quigley, if you want to say something, you ought to be able to say it. I mean, this place has become, this town is becoming a place where if there's any disagreement with the king who lives on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, then we silence you. You cannot have an opinion. You're accused of being part of Trump derangement syndrome. You know what that sounds like? The people who say that sounds like they're part of a cult. And I mean, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. The idea that we have some ICE agents who have ended up committing essentially human rights abuses against American citizens. American citizens, people with passports, are being picked up and detained. I mean, they're not even. Their status is they're U.S. citizens, and somehow we're going to explain that away, and everything is great. And if you raise any questions, about that somehow you have Trump derangement syndrome. I mean, read the polls, by the way. The American people are sick of this crap. They really are. But if you want to respond, Mr. Quigley, you want to finish your comment, you can have this time.
I think it's dangerous to tell people that if they have concerns with how law enforcement conducts its activities, they aren't for safe communities and they don't support the police. But it's difficult to listen to President Trump talk about law enforcement when he pardoned the insurrectionist. When 5 police officers died, over 100 additional officers were injured, and you and I were in the room where it happened. It's also difficult to listen to this and not get the balanced picture. We're trying to help law enforcement across the country be able to do its job well. In the bill we passed last week, one of my earmarks was 1,000 bulletproof vests for Chicago police officers. It's the second time we've done that. So if you're going to talk about insulting comments, you got to have some degree of empathy and understand where that person has been. So those of us in Chicago who care about safe communities appreciate and respect that there's a balance to all this, because we've seen the extremes on both sides. So you can support the brave men and women who keep us safe, who kept us safe on January 6th. I'm not sure we'd be here or whether our fragile little experiment in democracy would be here. But I appreciate getting a chance to set that straight.
I just want to say for the record, I support all of your amendments. Ms. Titus, I don't think people should be taxed on money that they don't earn. Mr. Larson, I agree with you, on the need to ensure privacy, especially with regard to Social Security data, and people who violate that privacy ought to be held to account. We ought to not be okay with that. Mr. Smucker, what you're proposing sounds reasonable to me. You ought to be able to bring it to the floor, and we ought to have a debate. And Ms. Stansberry, I agree with a number of the amendments that you offered, as well as Ms. Johnson. I mean, not only regarding ICE, but with regard to making sure that we all live up to our responsibility. It is amazing to me how difficult it is to get people in this place to actually vote to say that if, in fact, you want to go to war, you need to come to Congress and get an authorization for the use of military force. I mean, it's pretty clear in the Constitution. If you take a basic U.S. government history class, it basically tells you that that's Congress's responsibility. But and if you favor, by the way, sending troops to defend oil fields in Venezuela, then vote for it. If you don't, you vote no. If you support invading Greenland, you can vote for it. If you don't, you vote no. That's controversial, that we can't even do that. I mean, the fear that the guy in the White House has kind of instilled here, I mean, we become like potted plants. And here's the deal. This place should be a place where, we debate important issues. And unfortunately, what's happening is this place is becoming an institution where we debate trivial issues passionately and important ones not at all. We can disagree. That's fine. Let's allow amendments on our appropriation bills, and let's have it out on the floor. But I appreciate you all being here. And whether I agree with people or not, I do believe that people deserve to be respected when they come here. And I do believe that you can respect somebody who has a different opinion. And so, any event, I hope all your amendments are made in order. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Mr. Scott, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert for the record an article, DHS alleges criminal illegal alien ram law enforcement in California operation, agent fired weapon.
Without objection.
First of all, I'll say this. I wish Ms. Good was alive today. I hate that it happened. I really do. But the idea that that you can shut down ICE and DHS and everything else, and that America's going to be a safer place is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the reason we need 1,000 bulletproof vests for Chicago's police officers is because bad guys have guns and they shoot cops. But I just want y'all to know who they were going after. I'm just going to read this and then we'll move on. He had been given a deportation order over 6 years ago. He had been arrested for a violent criminal illegal alien from El Salvador, William Eduardo Morin Carvalho, who's involved in human smuggling operation, 2 prior arrests for inflicting corporal injury on a spouse or cohabitant. I mean, these agents are out there every single day trying to keep us safe from people who are engaged in human smuggling. And I don't mind talking. I'm sorry, Ms. Good said. I am. I wish the shots hadn't been fired, but they were. But this idea that you're going to shut down DHS and ICE and all of a sudden everything's going to be okay in America, it's just a ridiculous argument. And Madam Chair, I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you. Ms. Scanlon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think what has been kind of striking with the amendments that have been offered by this panel, the one before, probably the one after, is the number of folks who are seeking oversight of federal agencies on a variety of topics. And I think that's in large part because Congress is not exercising the oversight that it's our responsibility to do. And it's even more necessary now than it has ever been before, because we've seen this White House fire the inspectors general who ordinarily perform a great deal of this oversight and helps us get transparency and find out where there actually is fraud, waste, and abuse. And also because we've seen the Department of Justice weaponized in some really strange ways. People pulled off their traditional jobs of dealing with the kinds of criminal activity, et cetera, that we're talking about looking at in these cases. So that's one point. I think needing these amendments to ensure that we're conducting oversight is really important. And there's probably no better way to do that than attaching it to funding bills to make sure that people don't get to spend the money unless they're complying with congressional intent. The second thing is, I don't think anyone's saying that all ICE agents are bad, but what we are seeing is a lot of bad conduct by some ICE agents. We've repeatedly heard about ICE agents who've been threatened in the course of their duties, but what we are seeing in Minnesota, in Chicago, in other places, if you take the time to go and look, is things like a teaching assistant in Minneapolis when we were out there last week who was driving to work in the morning, American citizen, her car is rammed by an ICE agent's car, and they detain her and hold her for 12 hours. American citizen has done nothing wrong, but she gets swept up by an ICE agent. Or the ICE agents who tossed a canister of tear gas underneath a car of a family with 6 kids in the car, and they're just trying to drive home from a basketball game. The force of that canister going off caused the car to jump, all the airbags deployed. the tear gas comes in the car and the 6-month-old infant ends up not breathing and has to go to the hospital. So clearly we have ICE agents who are not acting in a way that is consistent with our Constitution. Just Friday, a judge in Minneapolis said they are using excessive force. They are violating people's First Amendment rights. So there is a huge need for oversight and reining in. And then the last thing, not on the topic of ICE, I'm very grateful to Mr. Larson for bringing his amendment with respect to these grotesque invasions of privacy of the Social Security Administration. You know, when the Doge brothers and everyone started coming in March and sweeping up data and getting into people's business at Social Security, a lot of my constituents were really upset. They came out, they protested, they said, what are you going to do to make sure that people aren't just invading our private data and using it for purposes that we don't want them to? And now we have even this administration having to admit that their Doge brothers who were in there with their fingers in everyone's data were actually working with outside political operatives who had purely political purposes. So again, there is a lot of oversight Congress should be doing. There's a lot of oversight that needs to get done by inspectors general, et cetera. So I really appreciate all the attention that you folks are bringing to these issues and would support the amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Mr. Griffith. Okay. Ms. Leisure-Fernandez.
Hello, Madam Chair. And I'm getting printed an article that I'd like to enter into the record because it addresses an issue that several of our panelists have raised in their amendments. So it addresses an issue that several of you have mentioned, which is the fact that people are being profiled and that what ICE is doing is not consistent with good law enforcement. And it points out, in fact, this is the chief of police in the Twin Cities is saying, my own law enforcement are being pulled over. We know what good policing should look like. We know they are violating our rights. And sadly, they are all people of color. And this is a Washington Post article. It's an Inform article. This is the chief of police. We should be listening to law enforcement in these areas. And he points out that it is eroding trust. So the work that we've all done, Democrats and Republicans, in terms of getting funding for law enforcement, getting funding for cops grants, ICE is destroying that. And none of us are sitting here saying, get rid of this on this dais. That's not where we're arguing, get rid of ICE. We are arguing accountability. And Representative Johnson, your amendments basically say we need to make sure that ICE follows the Constitution. You represent a good portion, and hopefully will continue to represent a good portion of Latinos in Texas. Tell us why you feel it's important to bring these amendments based on what you're hearing from Latinos in Texas about how they're being treated by ICE.
Well, thank you so much for the question. You know, the reality of it is what we're seeing on the ground is an assault against innocent people. It is an attack on people who are minding their own business, who are driving down the street, just pulled over at random. People are afraid. If you're Latino, a woman just this past weekend told me, you know, I am a successful person. I have followed all the rules, but I live in an affluent neighborhood. And I'm afraid to walk in my own neighborhood now without my passport for fear somebody might think I shouldn't be here as an American citizen. And, you know, I went and visited a detention center outside of Dallas. They have 1,100 people there. 700 of them had never had no criminal record whatsoever. This isn't gang members. This isn't violent criminals. No one is saying that if you commit violent crime in this country that you shouldn't be deported. But what we are saying is that you don't have the right to pull over and gang tackle, yank somebody out of their car for no probable cause and haul them to a detention center for 3 to 5 days without any ability to contact their rights, without any hearing, without anything at all. And that is what is happening. There's a complete trampling of due process, the rule of law, the constitutional rights that make this country what it is. It separates us from rogue dictatorship countries that terrorize its citizens for power. And that is where we are headed. And communities are terrified across this country. But in states like Texas, that's a majority state, people are scared to death. And that is why I'm here fighting every day to see that we can restore order in this country so that people can truly feel safe again.
It gets me so mad, the idea that it is all right, that the way you look or the way you speak is now becoming a probable cause, right? It is not probable cause. And so your amendments are consistent with enforcing the Constitution. I have similar amendments. I think we should pay them $500,000 because if that's what we're going to pay the senators who had their phone records
Let me just tell you a
released per
story.
warrant, we should pay these victims the same amount.
Right. I met with a man who has worked as a framer in construction for 26 years in this country, has 4 children born here. And the only reason he was put into ICE was because he was in a traffic stop. Not that he even violated a traffic stop, but he was like in a traffic check. And because he was Latino and didn't have papers, they're kicking him to El Salvador without a hearing, without anything, and leaving his 4 children. Who's going to take care of them? He's terrified of who's going to help provide for his kids. He did nothing wrong except work and add to our economy. And that is what's happening on the streets of this country, and it is not right.
Representative Stansbury, you were not excused from the panel, you were not really allowed to adequately respond to accusations that there is something called the Trump deranged syndrome. I'd like to give you the opportunity now.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I think what I would like to say, if it's okay, is to just add on to what my colleague was saying. I represent very humble communities in New Mexico, Albuquerque, and 10 rural counties. And I was home over the weekend, and I literally had hundreds of people come to speak to me. People are frightened right now. I had a mother with her child come and tell me that she's afraid that her child is going to be kidnapped from her preschool. Right before I walked into this hearing, one of my best lifelong friends texted me and said, "Are my children going to be abducted?" One of my best friends that I grew up with. That's what's happening in this country right now. So, Madam Chair and others on the committee who willfully are believing that somehow we are elevating these issues because we dislike the president or we dislike his policies, we're elevating the voices of millions of Americans who are afraid that their democracy is slipping away and that their children are going to be kidnapped and taken away from them. That is why we are raising these issues, because it is about the safety and the future of this country. And that is what we're trying to raise accountability about. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the article, ICE targeted off-duty police officers in Twin Cities, local police say, dated January 21st, 2026. It's all over in places, but this is a Washington Post article, and I quoted from it earlier.
Without objection.
And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back. I mean, I think we will continue to hear more of this in the next panel.
Thank you, Ms. Leisure-Fernandez. Seeing no other persons wishing to ask questions, the panel is dismissed. Thank you very much. Okay, all right. I know how to spell that one. I know how to spell it. Mr. Horsford. I'm not sure if Mr. Krishnamurthy is outside, but if he is, if somebody wants to tell him, Ms. Torres, former member of this committee, Ms. Crockett, Mr. Johnson, Ms. Dexter. And Mr. Miller. Okay. Mr. Horsford, you're recognized. And you know the drill, right? We appreciate your testimony. We'll put it in the record, but if you could keep your spoken remarks to 5 minutes or less, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Fox and Ranking Member McGovern and the members of the committee. Stephen Horsford, representing Nevada's 4th Congressional District. I'm here with my colleague, Representative Max Miller, to offer what we believe to be a very simple amendment, a bipartisan, bicameral amendment, an amendment to address a policy that was enacted with the passage of H.R. 1 that deals with the wagering loss deduction that now unjustly penalizes gaming patrons and tourists and creates great economic uncertainty for Nevada. Before H.R. 1, gamers could deduct 100% of their gambling losses, but unfortunately, because of a provision that was included in the Senate, that is now limited to 90%. That means people are going to have to pay taxes on money that they lost. Think about that, paying taxes for income you never actually earned. This policy is fundamentally unfair and causes real harm for Nevada's lawful, regulated gaming industry. It also threatens our broader tourism economy and thousands of jobs that depend on it. I have been raising this issue with the Ways and Means Committee as a member since H.R. 1 passed. I would like to recognize and thank Chairman Smith, who offered his commitment during a field hearing back in July of 2025 in Las Vegas to work with me to fix this issue. That is why I, alongside Representative Miller, my colleague from Ohio, have introduced the Full House Act. This bill corrects the mistake by restoring the full deduction for gambling losses. Our bill is simple and it's clean. We restore the law to what it was before HR 1. Nothing more, nothing less. This type of change is necessary to ensure that existing rules, regulations, and court precedents remain relevant. That is why I'm here. I do have one other amendment, Madam Chair, that I would like to ask my colleagues to consider, because like my colleagues, last year I attempted to conduct an oversight visit of an ICE facility in my congressional district, the Nevada Southern Detention Center. Upon arrival, me and my staff were denied entry by on-site personnel despite our clear legal authority under Public Law 11847, Section 527. That section of the law explicitly prohibits any federal agency receiving appropriated funds from impeding congressional access to facilities, personnel, or information. And thanks to the leadership of this committee's own Congressman, Mr. Neguse, and through Neguse versus U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the courts reaffirmed what should never have been in question. Members of Congress have the right and, in fact, the responsibility to oversee the institutions that we fund, and the power of the purse rests with Congress. Despite that ruling, this administration has once again sought to evade the law, this time by denying 3 of our colleagues oversight access because funding for that facility was provided through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act rather than through the regular appropriations process. My amendment, H.R. 7147, closes that loophole and makes clear that any funds appropriated by Congress, whether through the regular appropriations process or through budget reconciliation, must comply with Public Law 11847, Section 527. So these 2 amendments, which I believe are reasonable, and the one being bipartisan and bicameral, I would urge the committee's consideration that they be made in order and that they be brought to the floor for a full vote. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Horsford. Ms. Torres, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairwoman Fox, Ranking Member McGovern, and members of the committee. Today, I am offering 5 amendments to the Homeland Security Bill. For years, Republicans warned that federal agents would one day be deployed to our communities across America. You said that federal agents would go door to door hunting for our guns and would use force against anyone who tried to protect their Second Amendment rights. I am here to remind you of your own words. I am here to tell you that everything you said would happen, it's happening now, except that federal agents are being deployed to hunt our neighbors, our friends, our coworkers. Republicans often repeat the lie that federal agents are only hunting criminals, and killing and using military weapons against American citizens is the price we must pay for our safety. That too is a lie. For 12 months now, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have watched the violent interactions against hardworking immigrants and American citizens exercising their First Amendment right. For 12 months, you have refused to raise one finger or say one word in opposition of what is happening in our communities. The truth is, federal agents are using fear and brutality to punish anyone in opposition of these vile tactics. To say agents lack training, it is an insult to grieving children and family members. As representatives of the people, we are trying to keep the peace. We are teaching people to follow the law. Unfortunately, every day they encounter lawless federal agents who flee crime scenes and lie about their interactions with the public. The fear of leaving home, of a routine traffic stop, of violence is real. Maybe you choose to bury your head in the sand because ICE skips Republican zip codes. But in my district, ICE agents have shot an American citizen in the back and on his way to his work at a soup kitchen. Just last week, they detained another one of my constituents who is the sole provider for a little boy. Homeland Security funding is supposed to keep Americans safe. By law, Congress is required to conduct rigorous oversight, review performance, and demand answers when agencies fall short, except those efforts have been blocked in Congress, refusing to do their job. In the near future, Congress is going to stand in this room and say, we should have known better. For the record, we know better today. We know better right now. Homeland Security is not a license to violate the Constitution or our laws. That is why I'm offering these amendments. Amendment 1 would block any funding from being used to dismantle or undermine the Flores Settlement Agreement, court order protections that ensure children in immigration custody are kept in safe conditions and not detained indefinitely. Amendment 2 would prohibit the deportation of U.S. military veterans Veterans, unless they are provided legal counsel and a full hearing. We can't have veterans who come home with Purple Hearts deported without due process. Amendment 3 would require ICE to notify local law enforcement of operations within their jurisdictions. Right now, ICE operates in secrecy, creating dangerous confusion for local officers and communities alike. That is reckless. Amendment 4 is a Fairness to Freedom Act, which ensures legal representation for all immigrant detainees. Amendment 5 would provide $16.8 billion in emergency FEMA funding to help communities recover from major disasters that occurred last year in 2025, including wildfires, floods, tornadoes across 13 states. It ensures that FEMA has the resources to respond quickly and efficiently when families need us the most. Homeland Security funding is supposed to respond to disasters and help local law enforcement in real emergencies. In closing, Madam Chair, I urge my colleagues to support these amendments, and if this committee rejects substantive changes to this bill, I urge my colleagues to vote this bill down. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Torres. Mr. Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are witnessing goon squads without putting in place basic guardrails to protect our rights to liberty and life. Earlier this month, ICE agents shot and killed Renee Good, shot her in the face. Murder. She was a 37-year-old mother of 3 and a United States citizen. She dropped her child off at school and was brutally killed before she could drive back home. And the Trump administration is not even investigating the shooting. Instead, launching investigations to dig up dirt on Governor Walz, Mayor Fry, and Renee Good's wife, while blindly defending and covering up the agent who killed Renee. This week, ICE officers broke down the door of a Minnesota man with their guns drawn. He was a 56-year-old citizen who was singing karaoke with his family when ICE barged in, and they dragged him away in handcuffs in 14-degree weather in only his boxing shorts, Crocs, and a blanket that he grabbed from his 4-year-old grandson who had been sleeping on the couch. Did y'all see that? I know a lot of folks saw it. The horrors keep piling up. A teenage student with legal status who was taken into ICE custody for 5 days. Off-duty police officers in Minneapolis, St. Paul, in that area, being profiled and harassed by federal immigration agents. At this point, no one is safe. That's why any bill that provides funding to ICE operations should include language that allows federal agents to be held accountable in civil court when they violate someone's civil rights. This amendment is based on legislation I introduced called the Bivens Act, which would allow people to sue ICE and other federal agents when they violate people's civil rights. This is the accountability that we need to pass through legislation for the safety of not just ourselves, but our neighbors and our children. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment that would provide accountability for heavily armed, inadequately trained, unstable, and masked trigger-happy goons who are flooding our cities and killing our people. It's the least we can do to help people protect themselves from this unprecedented assault on civil liberties. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Ms. Dexter, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Ranking Member McGovern, and members of the committee. I testify today in fierce opposition to the Homeland Security Appropriations Bill. I'm honestly dumbfounded that we are having a disagreement on how our government must treat its people. The Department of Homeland Security, and particularly its immigration enforcement arms, ICE and CBP, for the last year have operated lawlessly and with near complete impunity. No transparency, no oversight, no accountability. As you've heard, immigration officials are racially profiling my neighbors, detaining people without warrants, tearing apart families who have been following all the rules, denying detainees communication with their families and lawyers once they are detained. They are being disappeared, certainly not getting due process. The trauma that has been inflicted on my community in Portland is profound. In Oregon's 3rd District, we've experienced this abuse up close, and here are just a few specific examples. A pregnant mother was denied medical care while in ICE custody. A father recovering from surgery had his window broken, seatbelt slashed, and then was torn from his car, re-injured by masked agents, and then denied medical care in detention. Peaceful protesters exercising their First Amendment rights have been repeatedly shot with pepper balls and tear gassed near the ICE processing center in Portland. Repeatedly, we have helped constituents who are asylum seekers who are being denied access to due process and credible fear interviews while in custody. 2 people, the day after a mother of 3, 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good was murdered, were shot in front of a healthcare facility in my district by Customs and Border Patrol. And 4 U.S. citizen children, were detained and held in a windowless cell for over 2 weeks by Customs and Border Protection in direct violation of human rights law and the agency's own policies. These are not isolated incidents. Overwhelmingly, people are being traumatized. They are not criminals. They are not the worst of the worst. They are being subjected to a deliberate and intentional pattern of abuse and terror, a pattern of state-sponsored fear and trauma that disproportionately targets immigrants, Black and brown communities, and vulnerable families. My community is scared. They're scared to go to work, scared to take their children to school. Children are waking with nightmares of the Iceman and are fearful that when they come home from school, their parents will have been disappeared. Families are increasingly recognizing the impact on our communities. Just last week, I met with community leaders who shared that gun violence and suicide rates are increasing as families are destabilized and are being torn apart. And yet, my community is resilient. This is not the America we believe in, that veterans have fought for, that immigrants have built. The rule of law must once again mean something, and we will not stand by while this government-sanctioned terror continues unchecked. That is why I offered an amendment today to include the Clear ID Act, a bill I led with Representative Crockett to prohibit funding for immigration enforcement activities unless and until there is full transparency and accountability. Let me be clear, transparency is not optional. Accountability is not optional. And certainly due process is not optional. These are bedrock principles of a democratic government, and right now DHS is failing to uphold every single one. I am also a co-sponsor of Representative Johnson's amendment to hold DHS agents accountable for their abuses by allowing citizens, as Representative Johnson just spoke to recover damages for constitutional violations committed against them by federal officers. Immigration agents' racial profiling, warrantless arrests, excessive and deadly use of force have destroyed lives and has to be stopped. If law enforcement officers cannot be held accountable, who can? Our country has entirely lost its way. There was a time when the American people could trust their government to tell the truth, to follow the law, to protect the vulnerable. That time has passed. What we are seeing now is the normalization of lawlessness, cruelty, assault, and even murder by those who are sworn to serve and protect the people they are terrorizing and are being paid by U.S. taxpayers. This is not normal. This is the stuff of a dystopian novel, and we cannot continue to stand for it. Until Congress reasserts its authority to oversee these agencies, there must be no more blank checks for immigration enforcement. Our communities deserve safety, security, and the rule of law. The time of the masked Iceman crashing into bedrooms without a warrant where families are sleeping, disappearing them into the night must stop. I urge my colleagues to pass my and Representative Johnson's amendments. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Dexter. Mr. Miller, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you, Ranking Member. I'm honored to be here this evening with my colleague with a great piece of legislation that is not only bicameral but bipartisan with Stephen Horsford. I believe he did a great job articulating the points, but just getting down to it, this bill that we are putting forward restores the original rule, allowing losses from wagering transactions to be deducted to the full extent of gains, aligning tax liability with actual economic reality, which I believe is where we need to be at this current moment in time. Americans should not be taxed on money they didn't actually take home, and I'm a big believer in that. What I'm seeing right now in downtown Cleveland, which is just outside of my district, we have a casino. And this is where our constituents, this is where they work. And with things in the working family and tax cut plan, like no tax on tips, that was a wonderful thing for the people within the service industry. But right now, people aren't going into those places, and those individuals aren't making those tips that we work so hard to get that accomplished for. And this is what is going to happen now is this money, and it already has started to happen, is fleeing overseas. It's going to Macau, and it's going to illicit countries that are going to be used any way that they see fit. And what this legislation does is it rights a wrong, and I believe it is incredibly important that this very prestigious committee and that Congress really take a look at how we can get this done. And I do believe it is important to our national security for reasons I had just mentioned and could get into at a later date. But thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Norman? Mr. McGovern?
First of all, Mr. Horsford and Mr. Miller, your bipartisan amendment sounds like a no-brainer, which probably means it won't be made in order. I hope I'm wrong on that. But I mean, it just seems to be common sense. Why should you be taxed on money you don't earn? It doesn't make any sense.
We agree, and I will just say hope springs eternal, and we are looking for every vehicle to correct this provision that was slipped in the Senate. And we've been working in a bipartisan way with the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, as well as the ranking member and leadership, to make sure that this issue is well understood, the reason and the rationale for bringing it forward now, and to make sure that we address this error as soon as possible. As Congressman Miller just said, when you create economic uncertainty, not only does it affect the industry as a whole, it affects our patrons, but most importantly, it affects the workers. And that is something that we're all here to address. And I would urge this committee's consideration and to rule this amendment in order and for consideration by the full body.
And to you and Mr. Johnson and Ms. Torres, Ms. Dexter, thank you for raising the concerns regarding ICE. I said at the opening of this hearing, which was like 100 hours ago, but I said, one of the things that troubles me is that some of us are playing by the old rules. And I think the executive branch is not playing by those rules. In fact, they're not playing by rules at all. And I think everybody here agrees that people who commit violent and terrible crimes ought to be held account, no matter where they were born, no matter where they were born. I mean, we're all committed to that. But what is troubling when it comes to ICE has been the excesses and the cruelty have just kind of been justified or ignored, or it's no big deal, or get over it. When U.S. citizens are being put in detention. I mentioned earlier, I did a field hearing in Everett, Massachusetts with Ayanna Presley on food insecurity. And it's a very diverse population that lives in Everett. And we did this gathering in a supermarket that was owned by a family that came from Colombia, but they're U.S. citizens. And they're telling us that, people who are U.S. citizens, people who are legal immigrants, who are legally are afraid to come to the store.
That's right.
Because they're afraid they'll be picked up for no reason, that they'll be questioned or detained, and they don't know what's going to happen. They're following the news, and the fact that nobody seems to want to address these excesses and these violations of human rights, quite frankly, and the fact that we're not doing the oversight here in Congress that, quite frankly, we should be doing. I think has resulted in you and a number of others coming up here and saying, we got to offer amendments. We have to debate these things. We have to vote on them. I am under no illusion that Kristi Noem at Homeland Security will address any of these things. I've been shocked at her insensitivity. I'm stunned. I think the only hope is that we do. And so I thank you for your amendments, and I look forward to supporting them all.
Thank you.
I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Mr. Griffith. Okay. Ms. Scanlon.
Thank you. Thank you all for bringing your amendments. And I do particularly want to thank those who are talking about the impact of the actions of rogue agents in our neighborhoods, because that's what I'm hearing every day from my constituents. And it's really distressing that our colleagues really don't want to hear about it or want to ignore it. I mean, just three really quick examples. I mentioned earlier that one of my constituents died last week in ICE custody, wasn't provided medical care, and what ICE is saying publicly does not match the information that we have elsewhere. The second one is a grandfather who was minding his 3-year-old grandchild at his home, and ICE took him, detained him at the house, took him away, left the 3-year-old there by himself. 3-year-old citizen. I'm not certain of the status of the grandfather, but I don't care.
Yeah.
And then the third one was right before I headed down here. I was talking with 2 constituents who have elderly mothers. They live in a neighborhood where ICE has been quite active, stopping people on the street, asking, where they're from or asking them to show documentation. The one fellow said he's not going to let his mother out of the house because she has a heart condition. I mean, she is a U.S. citizen, but she is a woman of color, and she is exactly who ICE is targeting in our neighborhoods, and they're afraid that she could have a heart attack. So the impact is on citizens, it's on non-citizens, and as you have eloquently said, it is not the American way. It is certainly not America first. And I really appreciate your amendments and your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Mr. Nagus, you're recognized.
I have no questions. Just thank the witnesses for their testimony, and in particular, Representative Horsford for your amendment, which I strongly support. As you mentioned, the basis for the lawsuit that we've been litigating in the unlawful nature of Secretary Noem's decisions with respect to trying to thwart and obstruct congressional oversight. And of course, Representative Torres is one of the plaintiffs in that lawsuit that Representative Horsford mentioned. So I would hope that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle would support ruling that particular amendment and all of the amendments that we're considering in order so that they can receive an up or down vote on the floor tomorrow. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Neguse. Ms. Leisure Fernandez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to thank every single one of the presenters for their amendments. I want to point out that every Democrat on the committee has supported the bipartisan amendments, the Republicans' amendments, as well as the Democrats, as they've been pointed out. We love bipartisanship on this committee, Madam Chair. But I do want to touch base on some of the amendments that dealt with how you treat people in ICE custody. Because the people in ICE custody, the 80%, over 80%, are innocent of any criminal wrongdoing. And some of them are residents, some of them are citizens. They shouldn't be there in the first place for an immigration facility. And Representative Torres, you have championed the need to treat the children in ICE facilities appropriately. Our resident doctor knows the importance of providing the medical care for people in ICE facility. And I just want to point out, Madam Chair, that the Democratic Women's Caucus has been very concerned about the way they've been treating women in these ICE facilities. They found that they are shackling women who are having miscarriages. There have been women who are pregnant who aren't getting the care they need. And when we care about pregnant women, we need to care about them wherever they happen to be. And so that is something that we've been arguing for. And it's not just so I want to enter into the record a letter from the Democratic Women's Caucus dated November 17th, 2025, that highlights and that asks the ICE enforcement director, what are you going to do about these? And we haven't really gotten an answer. So I'm going to enter it into the record here.
Without objection.
And then I'm going to enter into the record a study that has been done dated October 27, 2025, and another letter that documents the miscarriages, the denial of prenatal care, the inadequate food and medical attention for women held in immigration facilities, calling for the release and reform. And this is what we're getting.
Without objection.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I know that if I went through and read these through, because I know you are a woman of much empathy, that your heart would cry as well, because I know you are a woman of great empathy. But Representative Torres or Representative Dexter, do you want to touch on that this is real, that these are numbers, but you have dealt with and seen the women who are suffering in the facilities. Can you quickly just touch on that?
Just briefly, I want to say that my staff and I, when I'm in the district, we visit Adelanto on a weekly basis. Every Friday we're there. What we hear from women is that they're denied care when they're sick. I mean, I have had to really push and be forceful to get a woman who only spoke Chinese. They refused to provide a translator for our office to be able to engage with her. We were able to get an MRI done for her. She has a brain tumor. She just got released about 2 weeks ago. But the denial of care for women is incredible in this administration and the last administration. The denial of care for women who are nursing their children, the denial of healthy food, the fact that they are giving women with infants that have no teeth apples to feed their babies, frozen burritos to feed their babies. I mean, the stories that we hear from women, you would not want your pet to be treated in that manner, much less a human being. I know my colleagues care very much about human beings, and I think that this is an area that we should truly focus on and we can find bipartisan support.
Thank you.
If I may just add to that, thank you for elevating this. We have indeed had constituents who have been detained, denied access to full perinatal care. That is one part of how the impacts are on our family, but I think so distressingly, like meeting with the community members from my district who talk about members of the community who have committed suicide because they don't want to be sent back to El Salvador or to Mexico, and they're so concerned about their personal safety that the stress has overwhelmed them and they are literally committing suicide. That gun violence in these families where they are being, the person who pays the bills is being taken away and disappeared, that gun violence is increasing in our communities. This is not just impacting the people in detention, which, as Representative Torres has already said, is egregious and unconstitutional. When you take someone against their will into custody, you actually have a constitutional requirement to give them healthcare and humane
Treatment. You have to give a medical care, and I would point out, because I'm going to get gavelled out in a minute, is that the ICE has apparently stopped paying its third-party medical providers. They stopped paying them in October. And Madam Chair, we sent them a lot of money. They have the money to pay their medical providers, and there is a nice memo that documents, and maybe I can bring it, I love entering stuff in the records to just show that it is actually the case, that they are no longer paying their medical providers, and they said they pay them maybe in April. Well, that's not how, if you're not paying the medical providers, they're not going to they're going to stop showing up, and they have the money, right? We don't even need to pass this bill because we gave them so much money in the one big beautiful bill that was passed in July. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. I believe that there are no further questions for you, so the panel members are excused.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else seeking to testify on HR 7148 or HR 7147? Seeing none, this closes the hearing portion of our meeting. Without objection, the committee stands in recess, subject to the call of the chair.